City News Time, 9 o'clock.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011. Everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 20th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 12 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. He's likely a little jet-lagged, but our Prime Minister is shifting gears from mourning a monarch to making the world safer for democracy.
The Prime Minister finds himself in New York City this morning after arriving last night from Queen Elizabeth's state funeral in London. Trudeau is in the Big Apple for the start of the leader-level debates at the General Assembly of the United Nations. His UN agenda is laden with meetings on subjects close to his heart: climate change, gender equality, and sustainable development. He'll also take part in a roundtable with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on the virtues of inclusive job growth. Russian President Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine is sure to permeate every discussion about economic growth and food security, two other Trudeau priorities. Karen Rebo, The Canadian Press.
City News Time, 9:01, and now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Light rain showers at times today, but just through the morning, then cloudy conditions for the afternoon and continuing quite cool. Any fog will dissipate this morning. 16 degrees for the high. The average high is about 19 or 20. Tonight, mainly cloudy down to 11. And tomorrow, a warmer day for us, up to 22. Some showers and thunderstorms. For today, the high, 16.
And right now, it's 12 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. StatsCan says the national year-over-year inflation rate was 7% in August, so that marks the second straight month inflation has slowed on an annual basis. In the latest Consumer Price Index report, that federal agency says lower gas prices have largely driven this slowdown. One of the people running for mayor wants more information on a third-party group. Mark Sutcliffe says Horizon Ottawa should clarify if it has contributed to the McKinney campaign. Under provincial rules, third parties are allowed to advertise for a campaign, but they are not allowed to contribute. The Sutcliffe campaign says Horizon Ottawa has trained some 700 canvassers to go door to door looking to support the candidates they favor, and that could contravene the rules. That campaign has called on the Catherine McKinney campaign to clarify whether or not anyone from Horizon Ottawa is working on that campaign. The federal health minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, expected to table dental care legislation today. That would allow the government to send checks to low and middle income families and help them pay their children's oral health services. The benefit for qualifying children under the age of 12 is the first phase of the government's larger dental care ambition and a key element of the Liberal Party supply and confidence agreement with the New Democrats. The government will pay families up to $650 per child per year, just depending on their household income. Hurricane Fiona barreling toward Turks and Caicos now after causing damage in Puerto Rico as well as in the Dominican Republic. U.S. National Hurricane Center weather specialist Lisa Bucci says the storm is coming toward the British territory with very high winds.
We can expect, the maximum intensity of Fiona while it's over Turks and Caicos to be anywhere between 115 and 125 miles per hour.
Now, Atlantic Canadian forecasters keeping a close eye on the storm at Category 3 right now. It could still pack quite a punch this weekend. It's on a path for Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And Zdeno Chara has announced his retirement from the NHL after 24 seasons. Big Z says on Instagram he's returning to Boston, will sign a one-day deal so he can retire as a Bruin. Now, Chara spent 4 of his 24 seasons with the Senators before moving on to Boston for the 06-07 season and spent 14 of those 24 years with that club. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Oh, what a show, what a show, what a show. So much happening, so much news. It's hard to know where to start. So why don't we start with this? Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Thank you once again for making that decision to spend part of your day with us. Coming up, the inflation rate, as you heard with Andrew, is out. So let me break down some of the numbers. I've been going through the report this morning. We'll have some expert analysis, instant analysis coming right up. So this is the reading for August, right? And it's almost the third week of September. So we are kind of looking in the rearview mirror here. The headline number, this 7% number, it's all about the price of gas, because the price of gas was lower in August than it was in July, mercifully. But gas prices are still higher than they were a year ago. For example, back in July, gas prices were 35% higher than they were in July of 2021. Last month, August, gas prices were 22% higher than in August of 2021. And 22% higher is not as bad as 35% higher, so the inflation rate is lower. You see how it works? Inflation was 7.3% and now it's 7%, but you're still paying a lot more than you were this time last year. StatsCan calls this a moderation in price growth. Prices are still rising, just not as fast as they were, say, a month ago. Oh, but they're still rising. You go through the numbers here. Shelter prices, a big category, shelter, up 6.6%. Mortgage interest costs, with all these rate hikes, up 4.8%. Overall food prices, up 10.8%. The fastest pace of increase since 1981, when Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield was topping the hit parade. Meat prices up 6.5%, dairy prices up 7%. Just skip the bakery area. Bakery products up 15.4%. Fresh fruit up 13%. Condiments, spices and vinegars, mustard, ketchup, and relish, up 17%. My gosh, even if you want to live on wieners, it's expensive. In the appliance section, refrigerators and freezers up 12%, laundry and dishwashing appliances up 9.3%, cooking appliances up 7.9%. So inflation is lower, but prices are still going up, just not as much as they used to. And let's all do a victory lap. Philip Cross has forgotten more than I will ever know about the inflation rate. He was chief economic analyst for Statistics Canada, worked at the place for like 30 years. So he's coming up with some instant analysis. We'll also talk about the inflation rate with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University, with us every Tuesday morning with his hot take on the big news stories of the day. In addition to talking about the rising cost of living, as measured by that inflation report from StatsCan this morning, we will talk about the Trudeau government's plan to deal with it, because Parliament is back. And this is a top priority for the government. Inflation relief. House of Commons back in session today. Question period this afternoon. Pierre Poilievre, I'm sure, will be there. Mr. Trudeau will not. He's in New York City, so he won't be there. No Poilievre versus Trudeau fireworks today, I'm afraid. But one of the first orders of business will be the government's latest inflation relief package. This was outlined not that long ago by the Prime Minister, by the Minister of Finance, $4.6 billion. Temporary doubling of the GST tax credit. That's to be in place for 6 months. One-time top-up of what's known as the Canada Housing Benefit. That's worth $500 if you qualify for that. $500. And then there's the new dental plan. That goes on a sliding scale, depends on the household income. It's $650 per child if the household income is less than $70,000 a year, but then it falls to $390 per child if the household income is between $70,000 and $80,000 a year. And then it drops again to $240 per child if the family income is between $80,000 and $90,000 a year. If your family income is 1 penny over $90,000, you get nothing. But you add it all up, somebody's getting something because it's $4.6 billion of inflation relief. Some question the wisdom of such things because you have the Bank of Canada trying to cool inflation because there's too much demand in the economy. People have too much money to spend. So the Bank of Canada keeps raising interest rates. And then the government comes along, and what does it do because it's down in the polls? It gives some Canadians another $4.6 billion to spend. And some argue that makes the inflation rate that much harder. Also going to talk about this story that's in the news today. Municipal election campaign. We have this, registered third party. It's coming into focus. Horizon Ottawa. Far left wing group. It has endorsed, Catherine McKenney for mayor, has endorsed a slate of candidates across many of the wards in the races for the city council seats. So we'll come at this with the professor on a couple of fronts. Is what this group is doing, is it even legal? I mean, under the rules, you can spend $25,000 on election ads, but what's an ad these days? Like, what's an ad these days? An ad on the radio, that's an ad. One of our salespeople would be happy to book one for you, and we'll send you a bill. Same with the sales force over at Post Media. Same thing. Okay? But what about a video on Twitter? Okay? Or Facebook or YouTube? Slamming the opponents of McKenney. Okay? Is that an ad? Should it be considered an ad? This group also had a workshop to train volunteers to go door to door. Okay? It's not advertising, but is there some kind of cash value to that? That should be accounted for somehow. You see, this is what makes us so bad and smelly. Because it's American-style super PAC politics. It's exactly the kind of money that shouldn't be anywhere near the political process. Third parties. It was a good move when the Wynne government got rid of these things. It only did it because all the third parties had finally had enough of the Ontario Liberals. It's not like the Wynne Liberals' motives were pure, but it was still the right thing to do. And it was a dumb, stupid move for the Ford government to allow these third parties to continue to infest and distort the democratic process. So we're getting an expert on this to talk about it a little later on. We'll also talk about some of Horizon Ottawa's ideas on how to make housing more affordable. To say the least, they're novel. On the show this morning as well, my friend on the right side of things, syndicated columnist Michael Taube, used to write speeches for a guy named Stephen Harper. Lots to talk about with Parliament back. And Poilievre making his debut today in question period as the leader of the official opposition. Michael Taube had a column this week for the National Post, kind of a roadmap or a game plan, if you will, how Poilievre can become prime minister. So we'll ask him about that. How can Poilievre become prime minister? There's a poll that suggests some Canadians quite a few Canadians don't want him to become prime minister. Leger has a poll out. If the election was today, it's not, but let's pretend it is. Vote early and vote often. Conservatives, 34. Liberals, 28. NDP, 23. Greens and People's Party, 3 points each. But on who would make the best prime minister, it's Trudeau. Not by a lot, but it's still Trudeau, 24, Poilievre, 21, Singh, 21. In battleground Ontario, Conservatives, 34, Liberals, 32. Close race in Ontario. Maybe Justin Trudeau should hit the karaoke circuit. Get those poll numbers up. Okay? Given all the hubbub about his rendition of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. Some people think, this here Trudeau goes abroad again and he embarrasses us all, just like when he did his Mr. Dress-Up tour of India. Others say, hey, just like you and me, who hasn't pretended to be Freddie Mercury after a few sociables in a swanky London piano bar? Michael Taube on all of that, and we'll do the Talkback Hour. We do the Talkback Hour every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock, okay? We take an issue. Most of the time it's about a news story. We kick it around for an hour. You call, we chat. Sometimes we disagree. We try not to be disagreeable. 750-1310 is our call-in line after the 10 o'clock news. Today, regulating the internet. With Parliament back. And one of the other big jobs for the Trudeau government is to attempt to pass a bill. It will actually be one of several bills that it will attempt to pass that will regulate the internet. The bill in question today is C-11. There's a Senate committee meeting on this right now, right this minute, this very morning. This has already passed through the House of Commons, C-11, but the Senate wants to study it some more, so it's at this committee. Do you want the government to regulate the internet? That's the question for the Talkback Hour. It plans to. It says it needs to. Says the laws need to catch up with the technology and the government needs to get tougher on those big technology companies. So, needs to regulate the internet. And Bill C-11 is one way it plans to do that. It deals mostly with online streaming, and you remember the controversy. The government is going after your YouTube videos. What will this bill mean if you create content and post it on the internet? The government said it's not interested in regulating your YouTube videos or your TikTok videos. The language of the bill would seem to suggest that door is wide open. I've read the bill. The conversation starter is, do you want the government to regulate the internet? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Closed captioning is brought to you in part by Raven Reads. Unbox Indigenous voices. Subscribe today at ravenreads.org.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hi, this is Dominique Orley. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
Did you have fun? Check this out. It's nice, right?
You know the story, when the RCAF said Mach 2 fighter, 2 place, 1,000-mile range, the British said it was impossible. The Yanks tried twice and failed. They said, you're dreaming. We said, fine, we'll build it right here in Toronto. And now you guys, my guys, are saying that it can't be done, that they were right?
Now that's the rocket that we use to get the model up to speed, and then the onboard sensors tell us that...
Come on, baby.
Damn it! But we did it according to your specs. The specs have changed.
We did it.
Arrow 201. You cleared for takeoff.
Although the government cancelled the project and destroyed the prototypes, the Avro Arrow remains for Canada a world benchmark in aerospace achievement.
Enjoy the fresh outdoors. Play an important role in the lives of school-age children. Get paid to make a difference in your community. Become a crossing guard. We are currently recruiting crossing guards for the school year. We offer a competitive wage with various perks and opportunities for bonuses. Join the Ottawa Safety Council in keeping kids safe in the nation's capital. Find out more at crossing-guard.ca.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Inflation reading, consumer price index out within the last hour from Statistics Canada. And let's get some instant reaction and expert analysis from Philip Cross, former Chief Economic Analyst for StatsCan, Senior Fellow, Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
It's 7% versus 7.3. The month before, your reaction to the number, what does it mean?
It's obviously good news that the headline rate is coming down. But the bad news is that's probably the easy part. I mean, we're seeing inflation easing in the most high-profile prices, particularly gasoline prices came down. The housing market's off the boil. The promise of a very good crop in this country means the worst of food price inflation probably soon will be behind us. The problem is the inflation that remains is likely to be the hard part. And that's sort of what Jeremy Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve Board, was saying last week. And he sent world financial markets into a tumble when he said, you know, the fight against inflation is likely to be more prolonged and harder than a lot of people were assuming. And that's probably what we're seeing in the details of this report.
Right. So you have the all items number, that's 7%. And then you have what StatsCan calls core inflation. And as I look through the tables and the charts, I see that StatsCan actually has three ways it measures core inflation. And all three of them were higher in August than they were, for example, in April of 2022. And there have been a few rate hikes since April. That's why I'm mentioning it. 5.7 versus 5, 4.8 versus 4.5, 5.2 versus 5.1. What does that mean for you?
For me, that tells me that, you know, it is good news that the headline is coming down, but as just mentioned, you know, the hard part is likely to begin, and I think it really reflects that wages are going to be the sticky point at this point. It's one thing to lower housing and oil prices, they're relatively easy, but we're seeing inflation increasingly embedded into wage increases, and that runs the risk of perpetuating itself. It's also notable today, I mean, StatsCan didn't just release the inflation numbers, they also released data on job vacancies, and they show vacancies at a record high level in the second quarter. Wage increases were accelerating, and I think that's likely to be as important to the Bank of Canada as the headline rate of inflation coming down.
Okay, so what could it mean for the Bank of Canada and interest rates?
I think it means that we're going to see another large hike, maybe not 75 points like we've had recently, but quite likely 50 points in the next announcement coming in October. But more importantly, as Powell was saying, I think it means that rates are going to stay higher for longer. We're seeing, for example, short-term interest rates in the U.S. were pushing 4% this morning. The 10-year bond rate, which really reflects people's expectations for inflation, is up to 3.5%. So we've seen quite a marked deterioration in financial markets over the last week as markets digest this increasing fear that Powell articulated that the fight against inflation is going to be harder than we assumed. I think it was always naive to think that just a couple of interest rate hikes for a couple of months and, you know, we would be done with this. There was never a chance it was going to be that easy.
Okay. Soft landing. We've heard this term called a soft landing, that what the central banks, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, their ultimate goal would be to achieve a soft landing. In other words, to tame inflation without triggering a recession. How likely is a soft landing versus a recession?
Well, I think the chances of a soft landing are diminishing with every day. I wouldn't put it at zero, though. There is still a chance that that central banks will be able to pull this off, and that's where it comes back to the headline rate of inflation coming down. That there is some importance to that. That is what people notice, and particularly when they go to their employer and demand higher wages, that's what's motivating them. So the fact that headline is past peak and is coming down, if that helps to moderate wage demands, that'll stop, the wage price spiral that I think central banks and economists worry about. And so I think there's still a chance they can pull it off. It's a small window. It's the least likely scenario now, but you can't rule it out. And, fingers crossed that's what will be in store for us.
Okay. 2% was always the magic number for the Bank of Canada. If it could have annualized inflation at 2%, it felt that the economy was in a sweet spot, kind of the Goldilocks inflation rate. How long would it take, with inflation at 7%, how long could it take for inflation to drop back down to 2%?
The Bank of Canada is hoping, even in their most optimistic scenario, they're not projecting that until late in 2024. So we're looking at a couple of years, even if everything goes right.
Wow.
But if higher inflation becomes embedded in wages, and core inflation gets stuck at 4 or 5%, which is about where wages are running now, it could be a prolonged process. We may need 2 or 3 years of higher interest rates to get inflation back under control. So I think there's a real risk, as I mentioned, that financial markets are beginning to think, this is going to be more difficult and more prolonged than we first expected. I think that's increasingly likely to be the actual outcome.
Thank you for your time this morning. Greatly appreciated again.
My pleasure. Anytime, Rob.
Yep. Philip Cross, former Chief Economic Analyst, StatsCan, Senior Fellow, Macdonald-Laurier Institute, up right after the news. The Professor, Ian Lee from Carleton. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet here in Ottawa we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
I'm Mallory, and I was walking home one night when an impaired driver hit me. He had been overserved in 2 bars before getting behind the wheel. If the servers would have called him a cab instead of serving him more alcohol, my life would be the same as what it used to be. I think servers play the biggest role in keeping us safe because it's up to them what state the person's in when they leave. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law.
I'm Julian Armour from Music and Beyond. Join us for a new show this spring on Rogers called Music and Beyond Presents.
That's the way I kill my skill sharpen, cause I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, aka your favorite light skin, and you're gonna check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Neon murder every.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 20th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 12 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Inflation rate continues slowing a bit. Inflation in August was still at 7%. It cost you that much more for the same things this past August compared to 1 year ago. In Ottawa, that rate is slightly higher than the national average at 7.3, but it does still represent 2 straight months of inflation decline. Even though gas prices went down, the grocery store still cost you a pretty penny, rising at the fastest rate since 1981. Prices up for groceries 10.8% compared with a year ago. Federal government will be dealing with the cost of goods and services in the House. It picks up after the summer break today. Liberals signaling their fall priority will be to help Canada's most vulnerable. All political parties indicating cost of living is their top priority. Liberals also planning to introduce legislation to temporarily enhance the GST rebate for low-income Canadians. A couple of high-profile retirements in the NHL. Former Sens Zdeno Chara will sign a one-day deal with Boston to retire a Bruin after 24 seasons in the league, including 4 with Ottawa. Also, PK Subban announced his retirement from the league, playing 13 seasons. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
He is the Professor Ian Lease, Broad School of Business, Carleton University, with us every Tuesday. Good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Rob.
I sent Professor Lee an email dark and early this morning, and I said the inflation report is coming out at 8:30. I want you to read it and be ready to talk about it at 9:30.
Yes.
So you've read it?
Yes.
What do you think of it? What do you think of it?
It's mixed. To give full credit, there's some good news in this latest numbers. This is the August data because there's a lag, of course. We're now September 20th, so it takes them a while to, crunch the numbers and get it out. So this is the data for August. They're showing that because gas prices, energy prices are down, which we all know because we've been gassing up at the pump, this has pulled down overall inflation. So that's the good news. That is good news. But the bad news is there's a couple of bad pieces in there. Empirical bad news. Grocery inflation is up to 10%, and there can't be anything more existential than food. Everybody has to eat, whether you're unemployed, employed, rich, poor. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if the economy is booming or in a recession. We all have to eat, and nothing is more essential in this world than food. And that looks. I don't want to get apocalyptic and say it's out of control, but nobody can say that inflation over 10%, food inflation is a good thing. And this is really bad news. The other point that's probably many will not comment because I've noticed that pundits they just ignore this point. Wages. Average wages in August are up over 5%, which sure tells me that they are becoming embedded. And embedded means built into the entire price structure. And if they become embedded, I can predict, I think, with great accuracy, that the central bank, our central bank, the U.S. central bank, is just not going to accept that. Because then if you accept that, then what you're saying is you're going to have ongoing, because wages is such a large component of the GDP. I mean, just to explain the logic to everybody. Sure. I mean, most of us are wage earners, and we're a large chunk of GDP.
And I mean, for any organization, whether it's government or private sector, I mean, it's wages, wages, right?
So if they allow that to continue, what we're saying is we're looking at a world where we're going to live in a 5% world, and we know from it, all of us know from past experience, not only in Canada in the 70s under Pierre Trudeau, when I lived through it day by day, went from 4 to 5 to 7 to 8 to 10 to 12 to 14, that it is very destructive of growth. It creates much greater inequality. Inflation always hits, whacks, hurts, harms low-income people the most, not the least, the most. And so they got to react. And so the fact that the wages are going up 5%, if that doesn't guarantee future interest rate increases, and I'm talking the next in October and forward, then I don't know what will. And I do believe this is going to ensure future rate increases, even if it generates a recession.
Well, we just had Philip Cross on. I know you like Philip, right? From McDonald Laurier. He pointed to this, also released this week, was job vacancies, most ever. 997,000 job vacancies.
Yes.
Right? So if you want to find a worker and you're having a hard time, what do you have to do? Pay them more, right? Pay them more. So it says, I just pulled up the report. It says the average, now it's an average, some are low, some are higher. Average offered hourly wage up 5.3% to $24.05 an hour. $24.05 an hour, Professor.
Exactly.
Right?
This is, this is why the Bank of Canada, and I wouldn't want that job, and I mean that, because they're doing the serious leadership in our country today. It's not Trudeau, and it's not Chrystia Freeland, even though I do have grudging admiration for her, because she's a very intelligent person, Rhodes Scholar and all that good stuff. But they're doing kabuki theater and the dance of the dialectic. For those who don't get that reference, it was a famous book by Larry Zolf from CBC back in Trudeau's day, and Pierre Trudeau, and he wrote this hugely hilarious book called The Dance of the Dialectic about Pierre Trudeau's government. It was a very funny book. So Mr. Trudeau's son, Justin, is doing the dance of the dialectic again, and they're dancing around all over. It is the Bank of Canada, however imperfectly, they are doing the leadership and the heavy lifting on the economy right now, and they're fighting with one hand tied behind their back, because of course the fiscal policy of this government, of the Trudeau government, is to inject more money in to stimulate my flippant phrase or sarcastic phrase, they're trying to stimulate the inflation by pumping yet more money into the economy to make it run even hotter when we're trying to cool it down. So the job facing Tiff Macklem is tough, and it's getting tougher, and because of the wages becoming embedded, I think we're going to see interest rates. I would not be shocked if they hit into the 5 range. Everyone else is saying, the economists are saying it's going to into the 4. Even 3 months ago, they said, no, it's going to peak in around the 3 range for the central bank rate. Now they're saying, well, in the 4s. I wouldn't be surprised if they have to go to 5. And that implies mortgage rates in the 7 to 8% range.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's going to be painful for a lot of people. I'm just going through still some of this wage data that's here are from the job vacancies report, because there's an average, right? It's an average $24 an hour, but it depends what kind of job you have. Professional, scientific, technical service wages up 11%. Wholesale trade wages up 10%. Smaller for other ones, up 5.7% for people working in retail stores, up 5.2% for people working in construction. People working in healthcare only up 3.6%, but I suspect that has something to do with union contracts.
Yes.
Right? That were negotiated maybe before all of this. Really
once the books are written, and the analyses start to be published and so forth, I think that we will look back and we will rue. I mean, once the cooler heads prevail, once we're past this period, and I really do believe that analysts will say, we did make a mistake with the lockdown. The Chinese are proving it, right? You try and lock down a whole country and it doesn't end well, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, Trudeau at the time, remember at the press conferences, everybody remembers, he stood up there and looked very solemnly into the microphone, into the cameras, and we will do whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. We will not stop. And they did. They pumped in so much money into the economy. I'm not saying they caused the inflation. The lockdowns broke the supply chains, shattered them, and that was the independent variable that caused that let the genie out of the bottle, the inflation genie out of the bottle. But I am arguing very strongly that the government of Canada and the government of the United States response in driving interest rates down to the lowest level ever, and the unbelievable fiscal stimulus, far greater as a percentage of our GDP than any of the progressive European countries of Germany or Sweden or France. We stimulated far more, and this is making I believe, the problem far worse now.
All right.
It is becoming much more difficult to put that genie and that inflation genie back in the bottle because we were shooting ourselves in the foot by pumping out such gargantuan amounts of monetary and fiscal stimulus that it's floating around in the system still. You know, you pump the patient up with an enormous amount of drugs, and the drugs are still in the system, circulating in the body.
Okay. Yeah. I want to pick an old wound here with you and me. Let's talk about food and how food prices are worked into this, okay? Now, Ian Lee and I have sparred for a great many years over supply management.
Yes, we have.
Okay, and that supply management is supposed to be there to smooth out the volatile price fluctuations that can happen in some food prices, right? And we have dairy, poultry, and eggs are supply managed, and you hate supply management. It's basically communist. That's what you've told me. But, okay, but, dairy products up 7% in the last 12 months. Whereas, and you give heck to the dairy farmers. Those greedy dairy farmers and their cartel, and now they're making Canadians poorer and all of this stuff we know from you. Meantime, we have bakery products up 15%, okay? Fruit prices up 13%. Sugar prices up 11%. Fish. You never talk about the greedy fishermen.
Yeah.
And how their prices have gone up 9.3%. So what about this? What about this? What about this?
You know, thank God. By the way,
look, here's how I'll describe it. Thank goodness for supply management. So that Canadians can save a little money during this increasingly expensive time.
Completely wrong. And I haven't just picked on the farmers. I picked on any industry that believes in protectionism, and I include in that the airline industry that won't allow foreign airlines to come into Canada and fly across Canada. I include, of course, telecom. We won't allow ATT in here into Canada. And we have higher prices in each of those regulated, protected markets. One only has to cross the border at Ogdensburg and go to Price Chopper and compare the price of eggs or butter or any dairy products, and you will go into catatonic shock.
Well, why are my muffins and my bread so expensive in Canada then?
Listen,
why are my prices of bread going up 15%?
The inflation is reacting. Okay, so here's my complaint, and why I'm not trying to say that markets are not going to have inflation. We're living through it right now.
Right.
That's the adjustment mechanism to these imbalances in supply and demand. What I am against is a government regulatory body fixing the price. We know everywhere price and wage and price controls have been tried, they have been a catastrophic failure. Complete, total failure. The idea that bureaucrats in a little office with a big computer have more understanding of the vast number of prices in a $2 trillion decentralized economy is preposterous nonsense. That's the conceit of the Soviet Union. That's why it failed. It failed not because of ideology and because people couldn't watch Walt Disney. It failed because it had food shortages across the entire economy and people didn't have enough to eat. Supply management has, quote, worked, end quote, only because the rest of the economy is not price regulated. They get away with, this is the joke, you know, they're getting competitive prices on their John Deere tractors and all the equipment that they use on a dairy farm, but they're getting the benefit of high above market regulated prices. And let's be clear, if the prices were not above market, you would not need supply management. Supply management regulates the price far above the market price that you would exist if you didn't have supply management. And for those farmers that disagree with that, then the answer is then you have no problem getting rid of supply management, because if indeed the market price is the same as the regulated price, well then, hey, what's the problem?
Okay. Let me ask you, let's skip ahead and then we'll spend most of the time in the second half talking about municipal politics, okay?
Yep.
I can hear Jugmeat sing now. The reason the food inflation is running so hot is because of the greedy grocery store billionaires, like the Sobeys family, for example, right?
Yeah.
And they have the second largest grocery store chain. The Westons through Loblaws have the biggest one, right? So the CEO of Sobeys comes out and says to his shareholders, quote, "Quite frankly, I'm tired of these armchair quarterbacks who make little effort to understand even the basics of our business, but are comfortable sitting on the sidelines pontificating about how Canadian companies are reaping unreasonable profits on the backs of inflation. It's absolutely not true. These reckless and incendiary attacks are meant to divide us and sit in stark contrast to the collaboration and problem solving that we experienced in the darkest moments of the pandemic." So the CEO of Sobeys, Mr. Medline, says, hey, inflation, food inflation, don't blame your friendly neighborhood grocer. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with him.
You agree with
no,
him? Okay.
I don't have any shares, and no, I don't consult any grocery stores or any stores of any kind, but I'm very in strong agreement. Look, Jagmeet Singh is either a financial illiterate or he is a financial demagogue. The idea that the grocery stores invented or created food inflation to make it more difficult for people to buy their products is just so lunatic, is so idiotic. A moment's not thinking, for those who can think, which is most of us, would say, let's see, what he's saying and what these people are saying is the grocery stores are trying to make the product more expensive so people can't buy as much product. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Does anybody see the utter stupidity in that comment? No, they didn't. First off, it was caused by governments shutting down. Now, I'm not going to get into that debate whether they ought to have or should have, but the supply chain interruptions were caused by government, not the grocery stores. The grocery stores did not ask the government, we want you to close down the economy. Okay, it was the government decisions, government decision makers panicked across Canada and the States and other countries in the world, and they said, oh my God, we got to lock down all these young people, and everybody, but especially the workforce, and stop them from going to work, instead of doing other measures. I won't get into that. Suffice to say, that's where the problem started. It did not start with Sobeys or Loblaws or Metro or any grocery store. It started with government decision makers locking down large numbers of people in many countries and blowing up the supply chains. Then the problem of inflation was exacerbated by government again. They poured the gasoline on the fire with driving down interest rates to the lowest ever.
Yeah.
And they poured billions upon billions. They poured so much into the economy, we couldn't even spend it. We put $300 billion in the bank. And yet there was Trudeau saying, oh, my God, people are reduced to eating cat food and dog food, metaphorically speaking.
Oh, who can afford dog food anymore?
Yeah, and so we put way too much stimulus, which made the situation worse.
Okay.
And then, I know we're going to talk about it after the break, then you have the municipalities across Canada, that's government, by the way, municipal government, who are deliberately restricting the supply of housing across our country.
Okay, well, that's a good place to stop. That's a good place to stop. We'll stop right there. Professor Ian Lee is with us. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the policies that are being touted by at least one third-party group that finds itself in the news. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The houseless crisis, because it really is a crisis down here on Rideau Street. There is not enough shelters for men especially, and we need to be helping our most vulnerable.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
Sometimes it's hard to say goodbye to an old friend. But when you're saying farewell to your vehicle, Kidney Car makes it fast and easy. Just call or visit our website. We'll take any vehicle in any condition and give you a tax receipt for a minimum of $300. No headaches and no towing charges. It's the one-stop solution for getting rid of your unwanted vehicle in just a few short minutes. When your vehicles reach the end of the road, call us toll-free or visit kidneycar.ca.
I mean, policing in every community is going to be challenged. The community policing model is already a harm reduction response to the way that they police. I just think that we have, again, another opportunity to use police for the things that police should be used for, and then develop some other avenues for things that we can take off a police officer's plate, because it's just not what they should be doing.
$20. And Maggie, Mrs. Calabash, come into my kitchen. A quick mayonnaise, egg yolks, garlic, Dijon mustard, lemon juice, olive oil, immersion blender. Go down, come up. Voila, mayonnaise. Bum, 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 bum. $20. $20. Yeah.
Flooding is causing widespread devastation in Pakistan. More than 1,000 people have died. 1/3 of the country is underwater, and 6 million people are in need of emergency assistance. The humanitarian coalition is responding to the crisis in Pakistan. You can help. Donate today at together.ca, and your donation will be matched by the Canadian government. That's together.ca, the humanitarian coalition. Together, saving more lives.
Next time on Simply Cooking by Chef, I'm sharing some of my Italian family secrets. Come join me and see what they are while I prepare a traditional Italian pork feast.
You see a lot of these luxury rental apartments that are coming out, and if you're a single person, it makes it extremely challenging to afford just basic lifestyle needs.
Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Okay, let's talk about the municipal election. I know you're following it with great interest. We had a poll out recently from Main Street. McKinney leads Sutcliffe by 14 points. Okay, so there's what I call it the surrogate group. Okay, for the McKinney campaign, Horizon Ottawa, like really left wing. But I want to look at some of the kind of the pocketbook issues that this group, Horizon Ottawa, I'm not saying the McKinney campaign, but I'm saying this is the group that backs McKinney. And ask yourself, does this make sense for Ottawa? Would it make Ottawa more affordable? Would it solve the housing affordability issues that we face in Ottawa? For example, Horizon Ottawa promotes what it calls a progressive property tax. A tax rate that rises with the value of the property. It says property tax is a fixed percentage of a property's value, making it mildly progressive but less progressive than income taxes, where people with higher incomes pay a higher tax rate than do people with lower incomes. Wealth is a much broader concept than income. It includes the assets, notably property that an individual owns. In Ottawa, housing ownership is deeply unequal along racial and class lines. For this reason, a sharp increase to the property tax is justified to address inequalities. We propose a tax rate that rises with the value of the property. Am I missing something here?
You know, I just don't know where to start with this, because these are people who are not only financially illiterate, and I will explain that. I know that sounds inflammatory, but I will explain why they are financially illiterate. And they are about ad valorem tax and the progressivity of an ad valorem tax, which is embedded there. But they're also policy illiterate. Let me explain the latter first. Ms. McKenna, no candidate that is running to be mayor of Ottawa can affect issues of, e.g., inequality. If you want to be the Minister of Social Policy, run for Parliament or provincial MPP and get into the cabinet, and you can become the Minister of the Environment to deal with climate issues, or you can become the Minister of Social Policy or the Minister responsible for housing. These are national or provincial issues. So the first thing is, let's quote Bill Belichick again, stay in your lane and do your job.
Okay.
So she's confused on that. That's what I meant by
well,
the
again,
policy.
I'm saying this is Horizon Ottawa's proposal. I'm not necessarily...
She's adopted on her campaign site. She seems to have endorsed many of their alternative budget proposals.
Okay.
But let's go back to the financial illiteracy. I mean, I wrote an op-ed 25 years ago in the Ottawa Citizen. I heard where they would go read it. And at the time, I supported something. It was very controversial in Ottawa and across the province, and that was market value assessment for property taxes. And I argued that market value assessment was not only more fair, but it also, because, if the property goes up in value, the taxes you pay go up in value. But I said it was implicitly, very, very clearly progressive, and that's because of an ad valorem tax. And for those who don't understand what I'm talking about, an ad valorem tax is where you pay a percentage of the purchase price. So HST is an ad valorem tax. It's 13% on the value. You buy a boat, a fisherman, a little 9-foot skiff for $2,000, you pay 13%. If you're rich, you go out and buy $1 million boat, you're paying 13% on $1 million. Now, I think even the people surrounding in this Horizon House group can understand that 13% tax paid on $1 million is vastly greater than 13% on $2,000 or $10,000. Okay. So let's go to houses.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a very concrete example of what I'm talking about.
All right.
I live in the glebe.
Yes.
My lot is 35 feet wide. Yes, people, 35 feet. One of my neighbors is 4 feet away, their house wall, and the other is 8 feet away. Like, we are cheek by jowl. I'm not complaining. That's my choice. Hey, That's great.
Yeah.
My point is, my lot size is 1/3 of the lot size of the burbs. So therefore, I should be paying 1/3 of the taxes of the burbs, right? No.
Well, you're using 1/3 of the property, right?
I am paying over $10,000 a year of property taxes, and in the suburbs it's 4, 5, or 6. I'm not complaining, people. I'm not complaining. I'm trying to show the illiteracy, the financial illiteracy of the people around McKenna, saying that the tax is not progressive. It is the market value tax assessment, which we've had for 25 years or more, is progressive because the more expensive the house, the bigger the taxes you pay. And by the way, me paying $10,000, I'm not here to defend people in the glebe. That's not my point at all. Right. I know people in the glebe that are paying $20,000 a year in property taxes. Some paying $25,000. Wow. Okay, so my point is that there is, with an ad valorem tax, it is necessarily and logically and factually progressive because you pay a lot more tax with a much more expensive house or boat or Porsche or BMW. And this is something that people on the left don't understand because they don't understand budgeting, and they don't understand ad valorem tax, and they don't understand arithmetic.
Okay. We're out of time. We'll pick it up next week. Thank you.
I hope we do.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Professor Ian Lee, Associate Professor of Management at the Sprott School at Carleton University here in Ottawa. The news is coming up. And then the Talk Back Hour. What are we going to talk about? Oh, the federal government's plan to regulate the internet. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Rogers TV presents a series of original creative stories animated by local authors for children of all ages. Join us for Ottawa Storytellers.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hi, this is Dominique Orley. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
It isn't the heavy trays that make the job difficult, or the fast pace you need to keep up. It's not working another double because someone called in sick. What makes the job tough is the moment you realize a customer has had enough, and you have to make that decision not to overserve. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law. We know it's not easy, but we're counting on you to keep us all safe. Thank you, servers, for doing the tough job.
There we go.
He's going back in, okay?
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 20th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 12 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The inflation rate slowed again last month, largely driven nationally by lower gas prices, but the food inflation continues at a pace not seen in decades. The local numbers coming up, but first, here's our senior business editor, Mike Eppel, and the national rate.
The headline inflation rate was at 7%. That was actually down from the 7.6% July inflation reading, and it was below forecast. So we'll take a little bit of solace from that. But while gas prices were down actually quite dramatically from July into August. Remember in July, we were paying over $2 a liter to fill up the tank. And then late last month, we were down to around $1.60 per liter, $1.50. Well, that helped pull the overall inflation rate down from the July reading. Completely offset, however, when you went to the grocery store, as grocery bills jumped, according to Stats Canada, by 10.8% year over year. Biggest increase since 1981. And it'll also put more pressure on the Bank of Canada, likely to raise interest rates for a 6th time next month. They want to slow the economy, dampen consumer spending, and maybe pull price pressures down a little bit.
Now in Ottawa, the inflation rate was slightly higher last month than the national average. It was 7.3%. City News time, 10:01. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Light rain showers at times today, but just through the morning, then cloudy conditions for the afternoon and continuing quite cool. Any fog will dissipate this morning. 16 degrees for the high. The average high is about 19 or 20. Tonight, mainly cloudy down to 11. And tomorrow, a warmer day for us up to 22. Some showers and thunderstorms. For today, the high 16.
And right now, 12 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. Well, if a federal election were held today, a new poll suggests Canadians favor the current Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to lead the country over the newly elected Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre.
Leger released findings today from its latest survey on the voting intentions of Canadians, 1 year after the Liberals were re-elected to form a minority government. The data shows if an election were held today, 34% of respondents would vote Conservative, as compared to 28% who would vote Liberal. The survey paints a different picture, however, when it comes to who Canadians feel would make the best Prime Minister. It shows 24% picked Trudeau over 21% who answered Poilievre, who recently won leadership of the Conservative Party in a landslide victory. Stephanie Taylor, The Canadian Press, Ottawa.
The Liberals are signaling their full priority will be to help the most vulnerable in our country. The House of Commons resumes sitting today after the summer break. All political parties indicating the cost of living crisis will be their top priority. Liberals are planning to introduce legislation to temporarily enhance the GST rebate for those with the lowest incomes. They also plan to create a stop-guard dental benefit for young children until a full national dental program can be developed. Hurricane Fiona, now a major Category 3 storm. It's barreling through the Atlantic Ocean toward Turks and Caicos. ABC's Victor Oquendo says Fiona has brought serious harm on the way to Turks and Caicos.
Puerto Rico in the dark after powerful winds from Fiona knocked out power to nearly everyone on the island. Those winds non-stop for 2 days, dumping 30 inches of rain and leaving hundreds of thousands with no running water. 5 years after Hurricane Maria devastated the island, Fiona battering Puerto Rico, killing one person. The U.S. territory's governor calling the damage catastrophic.
Now, the National Hurricane Center in Atlantic Canada is keeping an eye on this storm. The current track has it moving toward eastern Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, and western Newfoundland over the weekend. Now, while some people do have their power back in Puerto Rico, the company that operates the grid there says it's going to take a long time, days, before it's fully restored. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Should the Trudeau government regulate the internet? Should the Trudeau government regulate the internet? Yes or no? Would you say, yes, the current regulations are out of date. They need to reflect the reality of today, the internet age. Big tech has too much power. And something must be done about all the hate online and all the disinformation online. 750-1310. Or would you say, no way? The regulator, in this case it would be the CRTC, shouldn't be regulating what's posted on the internet. It's not the same as traditional broadcasting. The government shouldn't be regulating what people upload to the internet, and there's a criminal code to deal with people who use hate speech. Share your thoughts. It's a very important issue. Do you want the Trudeau government to regulate the internet? Should the Trudeau government regulate the internet? It's happening, okay? So we should talk about it. There is a hearing about it this very morning. In fact, it's underway right now. A committee of senators is taking a good long look at one, because there are quite a few, but one of the Trudeau government's plans to regulate the internet. As we speak, a hearing is happening. And there are some who think this is the totally right thing to do. We have to modernize Canadian laws for the modern age. And there are others who are just totally against regulating the internet, and they can cite you chapter and verse why it's the wrong thing to do. And we can go through them as we make our way through the hour. But it all kind of comes back to this basic question for me. Do you want the Trudeau government to regulate the internet? Okay. How do you answer that question, yes or no? That's kind of like the conversation starter, and we can pick it up from there. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. John, good morning, John. You're on City News. John?
Yeah, good morning. I find it funny that the debate's all around free speech, and I don't think government has any business trying to regulate free speech on the internet. But
okay.
There's no explicit material talked about. I mean, I find that, if anything, for me personally, affects my life more, and I think that maybe that should be a place that the government could have a role to regulate. Okay. All right.
Okay. But so basically, when it comes to should the government regulate the internet, you say?
No, I would say no. Generally, no.
Generally speaking, no. Okay, John. Yeah. Thank you.
But if anywhere, explicit material would be a good place
explicit
to start.
Material.
Not free speech.
Okay, explicit material. Sure. Okay. Again, we already have, if you're talking about explicit material like, for example, child pornography, we already have laws against producing and possessing child pornography, for example. Derek in Ottawa, you're on City News. Derek.
Yeah, no, I don't think the government should be regulating the internet. I mean, as you said, there's already laws against hate speech. There's already laws against, inappropriate material being online or whatever.
Right.
The government having more authority to regulate it is totally unnecessary. I mean, I don't know if I'm not a big Twitter user. In fact, I've never used Twitter in my life.
Yeah.
But there's a hashtag trending right now saying Trudeau must go, and hundreds of thousands of people have shared their story and are basically saying Trudeau must go. So under this legislation, would that be eliminated?
I don't know if that would be eliminated.
I mean, right now, I guess Gerald Butts is arguing that it's Russian bots or something that are doing this, but it's not.
Maybe it is.
That's creepy to me. Like,
maybe it is.
Where's the line? What would they not allow? What would they allow? It's a very creepy, very bad path to go down, in my opinion.
Okay, slippery slope, you would say. All right.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Thanks.
Well, there are a lot of unanswered questions, I think, and that's what a lot of people want to know. And we'll try to spend some time this hour kind of filling in the blanks. But should the government regulate the internet? We have Parliament back, House of Commons getting going today, question period this afternoon. Poilievre, I'm sure, is going to be there, the new leader of the opposition. I know the Prime Minister is not going to be there because he's in New York City at the United Nations General Assembly. So much for the fireworks. But we have the Senate committee meeting happening right now because one of the first orders of business for the Trudeau government is regulating the internet. The bill is called C11. Okay, you may have heard of it, C11. Or maybe you know it by its old name, Bill C10. That bill died when Mr. Trudeau triggered the election. But now it's been resurrected, and it's now known as Bill C11. And it's already passed through the House of Commons. So it's off to the Senate, and the senators want to take a kind of a look under the hood. And one of the ways they do that is by holding these committee hearings. Now, this Bill C11 has also become known as the online streaming bill. Okay, the online streaming bill. Maybe you've heard it go by that name, the online streaming bill, because there was quite a brouhaha when the government first proposed this, because it seemed as though the government was going to regulate what's known as user content. Someone does a podcast, or someone is trying to make a living as a YouTuber, or someone is using TikTok, or someone fancies themselves to be an influencer. You know, what do you do for a living? I'm an influencer. Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of you. Maybe you should think about a career change. The language in the old bill suggested that the government was going to regulate that kind of content. And there was great uproar over it. And the Trudeau government was essentially shamed into backtracking, going back to the drawing board, coming up with new ways of trying to regulate the internet without regulating what ordinary Canadians post on the internet, which is user content. But how do you regulate the internet without trying to regulate the content on the internet, posted by users of the internet? So you see the giant can of worms that the government could be opening up here, and why some people might be worried about it. Now, the government insists with this new and improved Bill C11, it is not in any way going to regulate your YouTube videos. It's not coming for your TikTok videos. It's not going after the cute video you put on your Facebook page with your cat in the starring role. Government says it's not interested in any of that. The content creators, they say that, they disagree with the government. They say the bill is worded in such a way that it leaves the door wide open, gapingly wide open for the government to do just that. And that if the government didn't want to regulate what you posted on the internet, it would close that door. It would close that loophole in this bill. But the government isn't doing that. I think the content creators might have a point, and I'll go over why they think that, but in a moment. But should the government regulate the internet? Some of you might think, yeah, I'm okay with that. And others might say, I don't want to go there. That's uncomfortable. Diane in Orleans, you're on City News. Diane.
Absolutely no.
Absolutely no. Okay. Why?
I just think the government have got their noses in too many things as it is.
Okay.
That's all I've got to say about that.
That's all you've got to say? Okay, Diane. A woman, a few words this morning. Fair enough. Stittsville. Jason, you're on City News. Jason.
Hey, Rob. Good morning.
Hi. Should the government regulate the internet?
Yeah, no. There's an article a few months back in the Globe and Mail say that when I guess this was first proposed, or maybe it might have been right after it was passed, I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a Globe and Mail article, and they said that Twitter Canada had responded and said that the Liberals' proposed plan, Bill, I guess it was Bill C-11, was similar to authoritarian governments like China.
Oh, yes, I do remember that now. Yeah.
And North Korea. So, like, they never define misinformation. You know, like, what is it? Like, there was an article a few weeks ago I was reading, and it was talking about Jordan Peterson was denying climate change, misinformation around climate change. Now, I've been following Jordan Peterson for years. He never says anything without the data and the research and the science to back it up. Okay, right. So calling that misinformation, there may be other opinions, absolutely, and that's, I mean, we should be able to kick those around. I mean, it's the same around COVID and things like that. Things they called misinformation. Well, there was a lot of science to support certain positions that were contrary to the official narrative, but they just, painted all with this broad misinformation brush. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's really scary.
You're uncomfortable with it. You don't like the idea. Okay, no, I got you. Okay, we'll be right back. 10:15. Should the government regulate the internet? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a new season of the new Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet here in Ottawa we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
When it comes to drugs, how much freedom is too much for kids?
Drugs are out there. Will my teen feel free to say no around other kids?
I didn't live drug-free when I was younger. Can I admit that to my kids?
Drugs worry me, but how can I feel free to talk about it with my kids?
Questions about drugs and kids? Drug-Free Kids Canada.
My Uncle Cheney was one of over 150,000 Indigenous children that were taken to residential schools between the 1800s and 1996. My uncle ran away from school wanting to get home to his mom and dad, and sadly he didn't make it and died of exposure. When Gord Downey found out about my late Uncle Cheney's story, he wrote Secret Path, a series of poems that became an album, then a graphic novel, a documentary, and a concert. Gord met my family, and together we formed the Gord Downey and Cheney Winjack Fund. Together, we are sharing Secret Path and other reconciliation resources with legacy schools, setting up legacy spaces across Canada, and hosting events like Secret Path Week to inspire all Canadians to engage in reconciliation. Before he left us, Gord asked us all to do something.
You're gonna figure it out.
Will you join us? Together, we can make Canada a better place.
Enjoy the fresh outdoors. Play an important role in the lives of school-age children. Get paid to make a difference in your community. Become a crossing guard. We are currently recruiting crossing guards for the school year. We offer a competitive wage with various perks and opportunities for bonuses. Join the Ottawa Safety Council in keeping kids safe in the nation's capital. Find out more at crossing-guard.ca.
That's the way I kill my skill sharpen, cause I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, aka your favorite light skin, and you're gonna check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911 call it in. Neon murder every.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Should the government regulate the internet? Should the Trudeau government regulate the internet? Now, some might think, I'm okay with that. It's the internet age. The laws need to catch up with the internet age. And besides, it's the Trudeau government. It's a liberal government. My values are aligned with the Trudeau government's values. And we have to do something about the power of these big technology companies. We have to do something about all the online hate. We have to do something about disinformation. So we need a government that will modernize the law to reflect the internet age. Okay? I can see that point of view, but I would caution my liberal friends to think about it this way. It's not always going to be a Trudeau government. It's not always going to be a liberal government or a so-called progressive government. Someday, it could be a conservative government. You know, what if the question was, do you want the Poilievre government to regulate the internet? What would you think of that? I wonder how that would go over. What if the question was, do you want a conservative government led by Pierre Poilievre to regulate what you can see on the internet, what you can post to the internet? What if that was the Canada we were living in, the world we were living in? It might be much bigger news than it is right now. Right now, it's kind of being treated as, well, you know, this is happening in the Senate, and it's rather benign stuff, and whatever worries people, I'm sure the government has taken that into account. I don't know if that's the case. Should the government regulate the internet? 750-1310. Michael in Canada. You're on City News. Michael. Yeah, hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I don't think they should be internet because it will lead to controlling the people, and we will be told what to.
All right, bad connection there, Michael. Too bad. Wanted to hear what you had to say. Too bad your connection's so bad. Albert, Ottawa, you're on City News. Albert.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Albert.
Absolutely
Should the
not.
government regulate the internet? No,
absolutely not.
Okay.
We've already got laws on the book for things like
defamation.
Defamation.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, Rob.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling too well this morning, but
That's
we've
okay.
already got laws on the books for things that are spewed out that are wrong. I want to make a point of something here that 1 year ago, approximately a year ago, the CBC News throughout Canada on all CBC networks had cut off their comment section, okay?
Yeah.
So people cannot make a comment on anything that they post.
Yeah.
So
Well, lots of places are doing that, not just CBC. Lots of places are doing that.
Well, I'm on a lot of news networks, and I tell you, the only one that I see right now is the CBC, as far as a big broadcaster goes.
Okay.
And I would worry about the Liberals. Yesterday, Meghan McCain made a tweet. She said, have some respect for the occasion and why you're in London for the first place. Trudeau is such a clown. Now, if he has this type of authority over the internet, is he going to start to remove all these type of comments that are put towards him?
All right. Okay, Albert, thank you. I got you. Okay, there's another concerned citizen, I guess. Should the government regulate the internet? The bill that is being talked about right now at the Senate committee hearing this morning, digging into this, is just part of a wider project from the Trudeau government to bring forward new internet regulations. And I think the government would describe it as getting tough on big tech. We're going to get tough on big tech. So Bill C-11 is mostly about online streaming. But then there's going to be legislation about what the government calls online harms. Now, we haven't seen what's in this legislation just yet in any great detail. But online harms, you think about abuse and disinformation and online hate and online bullying. Some have questioned the need for a bill like that, since we already have a criminal code. Hate speech has been against the law since the 1970s. Uttering threats is against the law. Disinformation, maybe that's trickier. But the solutions that we know about are quite extensive. The Heritage Minister has said that misleading political communications could be federally regulated. Misleading communications could be federally regulated. Misleading in whose eyes? The government plans to hire a digital safety commissioner to provide advice on content moderation, issue compliance orders for Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, other such services with the threat of big fines up to $25 million for violators, a digital safety commissioner. But that's not Bill C-11. Okay, those are other bills that will eventually be coming down the line from the government to deal with quote-unquote online harms. So you have online streaming, you have online harms. Another one is getting big tech to pay for news. Having the tech giants pay news broadcasters, newspaper companies for news. That would be Bill C-18, the Online News Act. Now, this has created somewhat of a divide, even in the news business. It's created a divide, I would say, just as the assistance package for the newspaper business did many years ago. I mean, there was some in journalism begging newspaper publishers, don't take the government's money. Whatever you do, don't take the government's money. You'll forever be accused of being compromised. How can you legitimately cover the government when you're taking government money, right? You'll blow our credibility as journalists. They're going to say we're bought and paid for. There were journalists saying that. And now what are a lot of people saying after the newspapers took the money? Mainstream media in the back pockets of the government. They wouldn't even have jobs without the government. They're taking government money, right? Same kind of conversations are going to be happening with this bill. Should Google pay for news? Should Facebook pay for news? There's some in the news business who say, for sure, and it's about time. There's Google, there's Facebook. They don't have a single news reporter on the payroll. Google doesn't send anybody to Ottawa City Hall. Google doesn't send anybody to the Ottawa courthouse. Facebook doesn't send anybody to the school board meeting. But what do those companies do? They suck up all the ad dollars by posting the news that's created by money-losing newsrooms. So how is that fair? And the government doesn't think it's fair. And that's one way people are looking at it. Others in the news business happen to think the newsrooms of the nation should thank their lucky stars that there's a Google to drive traffic to their news websites. Let's say there's a big breaking news story from some local newsroom. Is it better or is it worse for that news site to be on Google News? Won't more people see it if it's on Google News and drive traffic to the local news website? Those debates are happening. And the Trudeau government has already decided it's going to make a big push in getting big tech into paying for the news, compensating news companies for the news. That's the Online News Act. One more way your government plans to regulate the internet. My question is, should the government be regulating the internet? At 750-1310, 750-1310. We'll pick it up right after the news. Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour. This is City News.
The houseless crisis, because it really is a crisis down here on Rideau Street. There is not enough shelters for men especially, and we need to be helping our most vulnerable.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, some people used the A word. They called it an accident, but it wasn't. An accident implies that no one was at fault. But when someone impaired by alcohol and/or drugs chooses to drive, they're fully responsible for the crash that can result. So please, for the memory of my brother DJ and the thousands of families whose lives have been shattered by impaired drivers, let's drop the A word.
A crash caused by impaired driving is not an accident.
Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., it's the Rtv Quiz. Giovanni Petiti hosts a weekly trivia competition that lets you play from the comfort of your couch. Play along at home and challenge your friends. And don't forget to follow along on social media. Let us know who's top of trivia, and you can find yourself featured on a future episode.
Are you kidding me, folks?
The Rtv Quiz, Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. on Rogers TV or at rogerstv.com/RTV Quiz.
Next time on Simply Cooking by Chef, I'm sharing some of my Italian family secrets. Come join me and see what they are while I prepare a traditional Italian pork feast.
You see a lot of these luxury rental apartments that are coming out, and if you're a single person, it makes it extremely challenging to afford just basic lifestyle needs.
For Ottawa and the Valley, this is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 20th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa, it is cloudy and 12. In Smith Falls, it is 13. And here's what's making news this hour. Mayoral candidate Mark Sutcliffe says he wants some more information on a third-party group, Horizon Ottawa. Sutcliffe says he wants the group to clarify if it has contributed to Catherine McKenna's campaign. This comes after Horizon Ottawa called Sutcliffe out for a fundraising event that charged attendees $1,200 each to attend. The Sutcliffe campaign is reporting that Horizon Ottawa has trained 700 canvassers to go door to door to solicit support for their preferred candidate. Under provincial rules, third parties are only allowed to advertise for campaigns. They are not allowed to contribute. In about 30 minutes, we'll get a clearer picture of Catherine McKenna's Green Space platform. The candidate for Ottawa mayor says they will explain their plan for green space in the city and how they will protect significant green space in the capital. The announcement is scheduled for 11 a.m. at Pinehee Forest. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in New York for the 77th General Assembly of the United Nations. Trudeau arrived in the U.S. late Monday after a long day that included attending the London funeral of Queen Elizabeth. Trudeau's UN agenda is to include talks about climate change, gender equality, and sustainable development. Secretary General Antonio Guterres says this year's gathering will be seized with an urgent sense of crisis. City News time is 10:31. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Should the government regulate the internet? Right, that's the question for the Talkback Hour. Yes or no, 750-1310. There's a line available there. Sometimes it takes time to explain, what's in legislation, what's not in legislation, what industry is saying, what critics are saying. The C11, let's talk about this a little bit more, okay? Senate hearing happening right now, Online Streaming Act. The government says it's not coming after you. Your influencer videos, your political satire on YouTube or TikTok, hey, your Freedom Convoy YouTube videos. You're a small fish. We have no interest in you. Okay, we're going after big tech. Want to go after big tech because the government says big tech isn't investing enough in creating Canadian content and telling Canadian stories. So this is kind of like what we used to call CanCon. If you're in the music radio business in Canada, there was a time you had to play so much Canadian music. So this is kind of bringing that into the internet age. And the government doesn't just want Canadian stories. It wants Canadian stories that reflect diversity, Indigenous stories, cultural, linguistic minorities, these kinds of things. It sounds admirable enough, but some problems. First, there's the language of the bill, which opponents say it just totally leaves the door open for the government to regulate those YouTube videos that it says it's not interested in regulating. The so-called user content, what people post on the internet, YouTube videos, TikTok videos, people trying to make a living as YouTubers, influencers, podcasters, whatever. because the way the bill is currently worded, you can see how some people would be left with the perception that the CRTC will be treating those new online ventures the same way the CRTC regulates traditional broadcasters like the radio show that I'm doing right now, where we are heavily, heavily regulated here. And it's all about two little parts of this bill. 411 and 412. That is what all of this controversy is about. Two little clauses, sections of this bill. Remember, the government faced a big backlash with its original bill, C-10, because the accusation was the government wants to regulate your YouTube videos. So they put it in this new bill. It says this act does not apply in respect of a program that is uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service by a user of the service for transmission over the internet and reception of other users of the service. And you would think that'd be the end of it. Okay, cool. They're not coming after my, whatever, Freedom Convoy YouTube feed. But then the government, in the very next paragraph, basically slips in what amounts to a notwithstanding clause. You know, notwithstanding all of that we just said, in the very next paragraph, it says, in making regulations, the commission, that would be the CRTC, shall consider the following matters. The extent to which a program uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service directly or indirectly generates revenue. So think about that. Is someone directly or indirectly making money from this? Is the uploader making money? Is the YouTuber making money, or is YouTube making money? Somewhere along the way, you would think somebody's probably directly or indirectly making money. And if so, the language of the bill suggests it could be regulated by the CRTC. You know, you have the national news on CTV and CBC, regulated by the CRTC. But then you have a YouTuber doing whatever, makeup videos, gamer videos, videos about cryptocurrencies, cooking shows, whatever. Why would the government leave the door open to having the CRTC regulate that kind of material? Why? What's the point? Is that even the CRTC's job? Right? Sam, thank you for waiting, Sam. I just needed to get those phrases out there. In Orleans, you're on City News. Sam.
No worries. Thanks for the time, Rob. It's interesting because I'm really not that concerned about the Canadian content element of it, and I think the legislation misses the mark. I mean, Canadian content worked well to promote the music industry. What I really think is more important, and I think the Trudeau government is taking the wrong approach on this with respect, is that it doesn't focus on the harm of the internet. Who cares if there's a lot of irresponsible junk, if it's Canadian or not? If it's irresponsible, causes harm and defames people and promotes hate, that's the real issue, not whether it's Canadian or not.
Okay.
I've always thought that perhaps the best way to do it would be to modernize our defamation laws and modernize some of the other laws we have with respect to regulating this, and then allowing private citizens to sue those who irresponsibly and willfully and intentionally disseminate false information with an intent to cause harm or mislead, and perhaps even create an administrative tribunal where it would be kind of a specialized court where you could go and lodge these complaints. I think that's the real issue, and I don't think government regulation is the way to go. I think it's giving individuals the tools in a court of law or an administrative tribunal to go after people who are recklessly and irresponsibly promoting misinformation. And an earlier caller said that, you know, we have the laws on the books.
Yeah.
Well, that's not quite true, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm a lawyer, by the way.
Yeah.
The
Never would have guessed.
defamation laws are completely, outdated. They haven't been updated in a long time. They don't address these kinds of things. They were put together before the internet existed. We need to update our tort system, and we need to update the laws that allow private citizens to go after irresponsible parties through the court system, as opposed to having the heavy hand of government regulating all this, in my humble opinion.
All right, Sam. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, interesting comments there. Christy in Ottawa. Christy.
Hello.
Hi, Christy. Should the government regulate the internet?
No.
Because it's going to try.
I can't even believe this is even a conversation that I'm having in my life right now.
Okay. All right.
Ultimately, I feel like the government needs to step back and stop trying to regulate everything, stop trying to regulate how we're thinking, stop trying to regulate conversations that are being had, stop trying to push what they want, because dialogue is so important on many levels, where we need to have multiple avenues of conversation. We need to have different opinions and different views so we can have these conversations and let people come to their own conclusions, because we're not all robots. We're not all the same. We all have different views and beliefs. So why are we trying to be shoved into one box of controlled, information that we're only allowed to hear? Like, what?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen that way.
You see, the government says we're not interested in your YouTube videos, Christy. We're not interested in what you post on Facebook. Maybe your name is Christy the Influencer. I don't know. Maybe you have 1 million followers. They're not. They say they're not interested in that, but then they put this bill forward. It's already passed through the House of Commons, and it seems as though that door is wide open. That they can, that. If it doesn't want the ability to regulate those kinds of postings on the internet, why doesn't the language in the bill reflect that?
Honestly, I don't believe that they wouldn't come after influencers. They say a lot of, oh, well, we won't do this, we won't do that, and then they turn around and do it anyway. So if you're not going to do it, write it in a way that you're not going to touch it. Don't leave it so open-ended that you could pretty much take over and start canceling people. So if that's their intent and they want to not censor influencers or YouTube videos, well, then write it in that way. But having it open-ended, I honestly, the way things have gone, there's a lot of lack of trust in the government now.
Yeah.
And they need to start building their relationships with their citizens, because they work for us.
Okay. Thank you, Christy. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's well said. It's well said. I mean, I remember when C10 was making its rounds and all the backlash. They're coming after my YouTube videos. They're coming after my TikTok videos. And then, the new language in the bill, 4.1-1, seemed to alleviate a lot of the concerns. This act does not apply in respect of a program, like a YouTube video, that is uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service, like YouTube or TikTok, by a user of the service for transmission over the internet and reception by other users of the service. People who watch YouTube videos on the internet. And again, you would think, okay, cool. They're not coming after my social media postings. But as I say, then in the very next paragraph, it goes on and it talks about this act applies in respect of a program that is uploaded. As described in the subsection, if the program is uploaded to the social media service by the provider of the service, well, am I uploading it or is YouTube uploading it? I can't upload it without YouTube or the provider's affiliate or by the agent or mandatory of either of them, or is prescribed by regulations made under Section 4.2. You see how the government speaks? And then you go down a little bit more and it says this. And this is the government opening up this giant can of worms. In making regulations, the Commission, the CRTC, should consider the following matters. The extent to which a program uploaded to an online undertaking, like YouTube, that provides a social media service, directly or indirectly, generates revenues. There are some people who are trying to make a living off of social media. Certainly the social media companies are doing very well, making money directly and indirectly. So that would seem to leave the door wide open to the CRTC regulating all sorts of content. Okay. But is that even the CRTC's job? Does it even have the skill set to do such a thing? Is someone directly or indirectly making money from uploading user content to social media now going to be regulated by the CRTC? It would seem so, and you can imagine not everyone is thrilled with that. And this is why I had to ask you, because this is in the Senate now. It's already passed through the House of Commons. Like, this is not a what-if thing. 750-1310. Be right back. Discoverability. We're going to talk about that next. Because that's a key aspect of this piece of legislation that could change the way, you experience streaming at home. This idea of discoverability. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Rogers TV presents a series of original creative stories animated by local authors for children of all ages. Join us for Ottawa Storytellers.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hi, this is Dominique Orley. I'm part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
We can be hurt. We can be bruised. We can be broken. Slowed down, confused, and even numbed. But we can't be defeated. We're built on a foundation that's strong. Our mission, unwavering. And together we'll beat as one.
Hi, Ottawa. I'm Derek Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa, and I invite you to tune in to Daytime Monday to Friday to find out what's happening in your city. We'll introduce you to fabulous artists, authors, musicians, local business owners. We'll tell you about the fantastic festivals and charity events that are happening in the city. We'll give you tips on health and wellness, some fabulous recipes, and so much more. That's Daytime Ottawa right here on Rogers TV.
$20. Hi, I'm Maggie. Come into my kitchen. When you're using salt in a recipe, check for saltiness. Not all salts are equal. A fine grain salt is a lot more salty than a large grain salt because that takes longer to get into the food. Bum, 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 bum. $20. $20. Down the
Flooding is causing widespread devastation in Pakistan. More than 1,000 people have died. 1/3 of the country is underwater, and 6 million people are in need of emergency assistance. The humanitarian coalition is responding to the crisis in Pakistan. You can help. Donate today at together.ca, and your donation will be matched by the Canadian government. That's together.ca, the humanitarian coalition. Together, saving more lives.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
Join me for season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Should the government regulate the internet? Lots of lines available. Maybe people are okay with the government regulating the internet. I guess they're okay with it. Discoverability. Noah, do you know what that means? Discoverability. Have you heard of that before? Discoverability.
I have not, actually.
Okay. All right. Because that's another aspect of C11 in the legislation. What does that mean in practical terms? Let me tell you. So that would force big streaming services, you know them, Netflix, Prime, Netflix and Prime and Apple. They would have to, under law, promote Canadian content through what's known as discoverability. So, for example, Noah, I like some UK TV shows, okay? There's a quirky crime show that I like called Midsummer Murders. You don't have to mock me. My wife mocks me on a daily basis for watching Midsummer Murders. And the Prime algorithm knows that I like that show. So when I log on to my account, it pops right up, right? And then it says, you know, you might like, da-da-da-da-da. You might like this. And you might want to subscribe to BritBox or whatever, right? So discoverability would force those streaming companies to promote certain Canadian shows. Canadian shows that reflect Canada's diversity. And those in the know in the high-tech world and in the streaming world, and even some in the Canadian film and TV industry, say that's going to be a recipe for disaster because you're going to have the government picking winners and losers. And some of what might be promoted might not even be Canadian content. And some content that is obviously Canadian might get missed. For example, you know, this is one example. Let's say you have a story about a Canadian-Korean family in the GTA, but the filmmaker lives in Los Angeles. And the distribution company is also owned by a Canadian, but they live in Dubai. So is it really Canadian content? Even though it's a story totally about a Canadian family? Discoverability, you know, I sit down to watch Midsummer Murders, and Prime is going to ask me, why don't you watch the Murdoch Mysteries instead? Well, I don't want to watch the Murdoch Mysteries. It's going to be a mess. And some in the Canadian film and TV industry say it totally misses the point. We want Canadian actors and producers and writers and camera people, lighting people, set designers, everything that goes into a multi-million-dollar production to be working. Whether that's they're working on a Canadian movie, or maybe they're working on a Hallmark Christmas movie that is being filmed in Almont, or a big blockbuster for the summer in Toronto or Vancouver. Whether it's a Canadian story or not, some in the entertainment industry saying our goal is to make sure our actors and our producers and our writers and our technology people, they can find work. That's our goal. Whether it's on an American production or a British production or a Canadian production. And that this whole discoverability issue, it just misses the point entirely. It's in this bill. This is not a what if. This is a when the government regulates the internet. I mean, look around. I mean, the Canadian film and TV business, doing very well. And they're not all telling Canadian stories, but it's employing a lot of Canadians. Should the government regulate the internet? Should the government regulate the internet? Glenn, Riverside South.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Glenn, thank you.
Yeah. I'm a stand-up comic, so this definitely affects me. I put stuff on YouTube all the time,
Interesting.
Instagram, etc.
Yeah.
You know, stuff that I've shot at my shows. And I like hot-button topics, Rob. Okay. I like politics. I like religion.
Okay.
I mean, I don't like religion. I'm saying I like to do jokes about it.
Right. Okay.
And this, first, I'm a big believer in complete free speech.
Okay.
Because if someone is saying something horrible, hateful, I'd like to know who that is.
I see. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Sure. Okay.
What do they say? Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
It's been known to be
so I say put it all out
that way.
Put it all out in the open.
Yes.
And then you can say, hey, that guy's a racist.
Okay.
But, you know, when they say that they're not going to lean on the small, that is not true at all. Because already Facebook kicks people off or suspends them or whatever for just the most minor silliness.
Right.
I had a friend got booted for 30 days for saying that somebody got roasted.
Okay.
You know.
Well,
that
yeah.
sort of
Well,
thing.
whatever. I mean, it's a private sector business, right? It's publicly traded or whatever through Alphabet, but it's a private company making those decisions. Okay.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that the government will lean on, say, YouTube.
Right. Well,
YouTube in turn will set its algorithms, lean whatever, and they never ever skew towards risk.
Right.
Because it's libel chill. Effectively, it's just libel chill.
Sure. And see, there's just these little lines in this legislation here. The extent to which a program uploaded to an online undertaking, that would be like YouTube is an online undertaking, that provides a social media service, directly or indirectly generates revenues.
Well,
now
until you're allowed to generate revenue, and there's certain hoops you have to go through on YouTube and other platforms.
Yeah.
They are making revenue off you because they can run ads on your content until you reach a certain threshold.
Yeah.
So somebody's always making
revenue.
So for them to say we can only regulate things that make money, they're regulating everything.
Yeah.
Right? And on the CanCon side, I've been in Canadian showbiz for 40 years.
Okay.
CanCon has helped me a little bit, I would say. But I would say overall, and more in the past, couple decades, when you say CanCon, that refers to a very specific subset of Canadians who are, we need to hear these stories,
Okay.
So
thank you, Glenn.
My
very
bottom line
interesting.
on this is any politician of any party who votes for this legislation is a traitor to the Canadian.
Well, I don't know. Is it, let's
no,
not.
that's what you're
Okay,
for
fine.
free speech or you're against it.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thank you. Okay. It's already passed, by the way. It's already passed through the House of Commons. It's in the Senate now. Oh, here's a treat. I wonder if he's still there. George, are you still there, George?
I'm alive.
Where have you been, man?
Oh, I've been sick.
Sick? No.
I'm probably going to die soon.
What's that?
I'll probably die soon.
Oh, no. I'm sorry to hear that, George.
Like a coma, I got Parkinson's and several other problems.
Oh, no. I'm sorry to hear that, George.
Well, the government shouldn't...
I would wonder where you've been.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, okay. Well, you get well soon.
The government shouldn't regulate it because they cover up so much stuff now as it is. Even your
I see.
covers up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look, George, if I don't hear from you soon, okay, you call back from time to time, okay?
You're always doing epitaph.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay, George, thank you. Yeah, George from Arnprior. I'm sorry to hear you're not doing too well, George. From time to time, I've wondered where you've been because I haven't heard you for a while. Look, just, a closing thought on this. Michael Taube is going to join us, syndicated columnist, former Harper speechwriter, one of our weekly contributors. He's going to be here right after the 11 o'clock news. He's going to talk about Polyev. But regulating the internet, think about what's involved in something like that, what a monumental task that is. And now think about the competence of this government to do day-to-day ordinary things. Okay, we're talking about the internet. Like this meta wide open space. And does any government, let alone this government, have the competence to regulate the internet? It can't manage an internet app like Arrive can. How can a government that can't get passengers through an airport in an efficient manner successfully regulate the internet? The government wants to regulate the internet, but it can't manage the local passport office. And on the examples go. Isn't it kind of arrogant for the government to think we can regulate the internet? It's not going to stop it from trying. This is the Rob Snow Show. Back after the 11 o'clock news, as I said, with Michael Taube on how Polyev can win the next election. That was Michael's last column for the National Post. That's right after the news here on City News.
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet Here in Ottawa, we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
Putting the focus on smaller businesses and less larger sized businesses, as it's very different for people like me that are like literal small business owners, where we've bootstrapped money and we don't have a lot of funding, and to be able to help us through that. There has been some help for us, but I think it would be a greater opportunity to see us thrive through the next couple of years.
Hi, I'm Meg from AIM Fitness, and I'm here with my buddy Fit Finley. Join us every week for Fit Over 50. We'll take you through some low-impact and high-intensity workouts designed to improve your strength and your balance. All you'll need is a resistance band, some light hand weights, and also your water bottle and a sturdy chair. Tune in right here on Rogers TV and let us be part of your weekly routine.
The way I kill my skill sharpen, cause I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, aka your favorite light skin, and you're gonna check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911, call it in. Neon murder every.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
In Ottawa.
And CJET 101.1 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 20th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now, it is cloudy and 13 in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Cheaper prices at the pumps have helped decelerate inflation in August to 7%.
Statistics Canada says its latest consumer price report marks the second consecutive month inflation has slowed on an annual basis. The agency says transportation and shelter prices also drove the slowdown in consumer prices. But grocery prices rose at the fastest rate since 1981, with prices up 10.8% compared with a year ago. Statistics Canada is blaming that on continued supply chain disruptions, Russia's war in Ukraine, extreme weather, and higher input costs. Brenda Molina Navidad, The Canadian Press.
And the House of Commons is getting back underway after the summer break. And the top priority for MPs is the cost of living crisis. City News parliamentary reporter Cormac McSweeney has the latest.
The first order of business for the government will be to introduce legislation to push through the measures announced by the Prime Minister to try and help the hardest hit Canadians deal with the pressures of inflation. That will include dental care checks of up to $650 per child per year for low and middle income families, a temporary boost to the GST rebate, and an enhanced housing allowance benefit. Government House Leader Mark Holland hopes the opposition parties will work with them to get this passed quickly.
This is not a time for parlor tricks. This is not a time for shell games. This is a time for real solutions.
The new measures address some of the demands from the supply and confidence deal the Liberals have with the NDP, which means there should be no concern about this minority government being toppled anytime soon. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
With the weather forecast for Ottawa and the Valley, here is City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Light rain showers at times today, but just through the morning, then cloudy conditions for the afternoon and continuing quite cool. Any fog will dissipate this morning. 16 degrees for the high. The average high is about 19 or 20. Tonight, mainly cloudy down to 11. And tomorrow, a warmer day for us, up to 22. Some showers and thunderstorms. For today, the high, 16.
City News time is 11:02. A constitutional challenge of an Ontario law that caps public sector wage increases at 1% annually is back in courts this week. Government lawyers told the provincial court that public sector workers' constitutional bargaining rights are not infringed by the law. Groups representing hundreds of public sector employees challenging Bill 124 said the law has taken away meaningful collective bargaining, violating the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But the province argues the charter protects only the process of bargaining and not the outcome. The head of the United Nations delivers his State of the World speech at today's opening of the 77th General Assembly. UN Secretary and General Antonio Guterres says the global community must unite to tackle challenges from climate change to hunger.
Our world is in peril and paralyzed. Geopolitical divides are undermining the work of the Security Council, undermining international law, undermining trust and people's faith in democratic institutions, undermining all forms of international cooperation. We cannot go on like this.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in New York for the annual high-level global gathering to talk about climate change, gender equality, and sustainable development. The separatist leaders of 4 Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine say they are planning to hold votes starting later this week for the territories to become part of Russia as Moscow loses ground in the war it launched. The 4 regions are Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk and Zaporizhia. The announcement of a referendum starting Friday came after a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin said today that they were needed. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev also said that folding Luhansk and Donetsk in eastern Ukraine into Russia itself would make their redrawn frontiers irreversible and enable Moscow to use any means to defend them. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
My friend on the right side of things, syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Prime Minister Harper, Michael Taube is back with me on the Rob Snow Show on City News. Good morning. Oh, hi. There we go. Oh. That's my fault. I didn't press the right button. I've only been here 3 years. I know it's silly. I've got
only 3 years.
I know. I only need to know 2 buttons to press. Jeepers.
On off. Exactly.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Good. So, National Post, you may have seen the column, read the column this week. Michael Taube's column, National Post, headlined, How Pierre Poilievre Can Become Canada's Next Prime Minister. The new party leader is a true conservative. Right. He's willing to explore non-conservative ideas that fit under the parameters of common sense. It's a great column, offers a bit of a roadmap for Mr. Poilievre. For our listeners, please outline some of your ideas.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. Yeah, it does. And obviously, you can't put everything together in a column. It would take, well, quite frankly, take a book. But what I did was sort of do a starting point in terms of what Pierre Poilievre did, which most of us know, how he succeeded in the Conservative leadership campaign, and how he can take those strategies into a general election. Because as we know, operating a leadership campaign or a leadership race and winning it is very different than operating during a general election, or federal as we call it here, and winning it. The strategies are very different. It doesn't mean that you have to change your outlook, your policies, your demeanor, your main message, etc., but you have to tinker with things a little bit so that obviously you get as many eyes and ears on you for as long as possible. And one of the things I pointed out, and I think I'm the first, Rob, to have noted this, but I may not have been, is that he was actually taking strategies that are typically used during a general election and started to incorporate them into his leadership race. And basically the way I kind of did it was I sort of showed some of the things that he had been talking about, where, for example, his messaging, where he basically tried to ensure that he was always identifying with average Canadians. So rather than just targeting conservative supporters, of which he got a lot of, he also ensured that the people who were coming into his campaign, and that includes all the young voters, political independents, the apolitical and otherwise, that they had something sort of to grasp onto too. And one of the things I said was he actually took a dollars and cents approach to politics. And one of the ways he did that, one of his last videos before he was elected Conservative leader, was where he talked about the rising costs of milk, butter, bread, etc.
Yeah.
Now, unsurprisingly, Rob, a lot of people mocked that, especially on the political left, claiming that it was just pointless blather and it wasn't going to help them at all. Yet they missed the point, as they typically do. which is that dollars and cents approach appeals not just to average voters, it appeals to all Canadian voters, no matter what their position of life is, their status, their wealth, whether they're living paycheck to paycheck, whether they have a mortgage or they paid off their house, etc. These are things that we understand, and daily staples like butter, milk, bread, and other things are things that people work hard for and ensure that they have on the table for them or for their children or whomever. That's one way of doing it. Okay. And also, if you look at some of the language, which is interesting, he used language that conservatives by nature, Rob, don't typically use. And I put in some of them. Like when he was talking, for example, his video about affordable housing, which you and I have talked about multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
That's a topic that, sure, lots of people address. You might even address it during a general election if you have to, if it becomes a very prominent issue or if there's a reason for it. But conservatives by nature don't go into areas that they're not comfortable with or that they're not comfortable with the language of or the machinations behind or proposing strategies that they think will sell with the general populace. Even the use of cryptocurrency was a bit unusual, and also the point where Poilievre talked about gatekeepers in society and how to limit them. This is all language that, some people on the right, some people on the left use. We know that. But it's not typically used during leadership campaigns when you're trying to basically target your support to core areas, in this case, conservative support. Because Poilievre's campaign had many different tentacles and went in different ways to attract people who were not traditionally conservative, he used language and messaging that is atypical of a conservative leadership campaign. And it worked out brilliantly to the point that I think a lot of people who follow him will realize, if nothing else, that they can use this type of language, this type of messaging, or go off in different directions that are not traditional for conservatives to use if, one, they feel comfortable doing so, and two, if they realize or understand that it can resonate with a larger percentage of the population. Poilievre opened the door to some interesting discussions on the conservative side, and it starts off his campaign in terms of, I can't just win if I run as a conservative. I have to run as a conservative who appeals to Canadians. And that's what he did.
Yeah, it's got to grow. The Conservative Party has to grow, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. I have to ask you, because this is kind of a developing story this morning, and whether in all your years you've seen a story about what is basically based on a poll, in this case a Leger poll, framed quite this way. So it's a Canadian Press news story. And typically, a Canadian Press news story about a poll would typically say, the poll was done by this polling firm, and this is what it says about voting intentions if the election was today.
Yeah.
So this is the lead. A new poll suggests Canadians still believe Justin Trudeau is still the best man for the job of Prime Minister, but he has only a slight lead over new Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Leger's released the findings of an online survey conducted September 16th, September 18th, 1,522 respondents, 10 days after Poilievre's landslide victory. Yada, 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 yada.
Pardon me.
Okay. So, you have to read, let me see how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs in till you find this. Around 28% of respondents said they would cast a ballot for the Liberals if an election were held today.
Right.
As compared to 33% who did last September.
Yeah.
And then 2 more paragraphs down, about 34% of respondents said they would park their vote with the Tories. 8 paragraphs in before you get to the Tories are in the lead, 34 to 28, which is a rather substantial 6-point lead.
Yeah.
I just find that to be a very strange way to write a story about a 6-point lead for the Conservatives.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
I don't know why it would be written that way.
I could sort of guess, and unfortunately, it's not what people want to hear sometimes. But unfortunately, there is a bit of manufacturing of news in the sense that not that the news isn't accurate, you're focusing on particular points that you want to get across early to people, and in hopes that they will not continue to read the whole article through or the whole piece through, as you did, for example.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, that's why caption news or little captions that you see or capsules, if you wish, on news items tend to work better because people don't think, act, understand, look into material in large chunks. They like it in small bites. That's why buzz clips and buzzwords work so successfully in ads. Or that's why we've seen political speeches gone down from, I think I've even talked about this with you, or certainly, Mark Sutcliffe when I was on with him on this station. You look at the Lincoln-Douglas debates and how emphatic they were, and they went on for hours with, astonishing speech, magnificent prose, great ideas, etc., to the point now where the last few presidential debates, for example, have been these little tiny 15 to 30-second clips that you can get right, bulletins that go right on the news, start off the discussion, and everything else that's within it, even if it's important, tends to be ignored. That's what happens here. So basically, the Canadian press wanted to obviously just emphasize the fact that Justin Trudeau, who presumably the people who worked on this piece would favor or support or would be more inclined to like or to keep in power for as long as possible. So they decided to just emphasize the fact that as a trusted leader, he's still slightly ahead of Pierre Poilievre, which is not shocking because he's been prime minister for over 7 years. And Poilievre has only been.
I find it interesting that preferred prime minister, the score is 24-21-21. It's 3 points, 24-21-21.
Margin of error.
Right.
Exactly.
Whereas the actual poll results is a 6-point lead for the Conservatives, and now the Conservatives have a leader. So anyway, all right. Just a weird story. Weird way to write the story.
I agree, but it happens.
Yeah. 11:15, we're here with Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, speechwriter, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper was there with Justin Trudeau in the UK, along with a number of other former prime ministers, Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, Kim Campbell. Nice to see Mr. Harper and his Order of Canada investiture. That was nice. Nice touch. And while all of that was happening, and probably while the old-timers were tucked away in bed, there was Mr. Trudeau, belting out Bohemian Rhapsody. And going viral.
Yeah.
2 days before the Queen's funeral. Let's listen here. Okay.
I think we got the idea wrong.
So, what do you think? Is this, is this like Mr. Trudeau does dress up again like India? He's embarrassing us on the world stage? Or, look, Justin Trudeau's, he's just a regular guy, who hasn't had a few sociables and pretended they were Freddie Mercury at a swanky London piano bar. What do you think? What do you think of this story?
Look, I'm sort of in the middle in the sense that Justin Trudeau has done so many bad things as prime minister that this doesn't even come nearly as close to them. But at the same time, it's one of those things that is it appropriate to go out and blow off some steam, so to speak, when you come in, obviously, to the UK for Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, and knowing full well that people always pull out their phones, pull out their recording devices, do whatever they do, and they're going to tape you in some fashion. I don't have an issue if he wants to sing Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't have an issue if he wants to sing along with other people. I don't have an issue if he wants to have fun. I mean, there are appropriate moments for all of this. We recognize it. But at a somber event like this, even though, yes, he wasn't going to the funeral that particular day and that he was in the UK for a few days, I just think it sets a poor tone. It doesn't embarrass the country, but it's embarrassing. It should be embarrassing for him that he's associated with it. But again, unsurprisingly, Rob, I'm sure that the liberal spin doctors have looked at this and they don't think it's anything. They think it's a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah.
And in some ways it might be, but in other ways it's just another layer of, shall we say, mediocrity added to a prime minister who has been so incredibly mediocre since he was first elected in 2015.
Like 100 world leaders, you know, other members of royal families, you know, presidents and prime ministers, and ours is the only one who is seemingly half-snap doing a Freddie Mercury impersonation.
And happy doing it. That's what also looks bad. The fact that they were all smiling in the photo, the five prime ministers that you mentioned with my old friend and boss Stephen Harper wearing his Order of Canada, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's an official photo. That's the way it should be done. I thought it was a nice photo, and it was a good idea overall.
Yeah.
This was not. It's just as simple as that.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Alberta politics. My goodness, this is really sneaking up on us. October 6th. So not long now. United Conservative Party, remember, Jason Kenney, listeners, is leaving. And whoever wins this is going to become Premier of Alberta, right?
Right.
And so Danielle Smith, who you like, you've known for a long time, has created a lot of controversy with this Sovereignty Act. I think she's on to something with rural policing and getting the RCMP out of there. And I think that's maybe a
good call.
Story to be told there, given Portapique and given Saskatchewan and other things. But nevertheless, Don Braid, Calgary Herald, really like his columns. I don't know him, never met him, but really like the columns. So, this is what he wrote this week for the Calgary Herald. With all the UCP uproar over Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act promise, it's widely believed the government caucus will melt down in bitter division if she wins the leadership, paving the way for an NDP victory next spring. Don't count on that, which is an interesting take. Many in the UCP's 60-member caucus are already adjusting to the strong possibility Smith will win October 6th. These are politicians, above all else. They want to win another election. One MLA summed up the feelings this way. There is no one in this caucus, not one person, who thinks a Rachel Notley-led government is better than a Danielle Smith-led government. The feeling is, let's get our arrows pointed in the same direction. So, what's your view of what is going to happen to the UCP if Danielle Smith is elected, party leader, becomes next Alberta Premier? Meltdown or unity?
Yeah, it'll be unity. And it's actually what we just sort of lived through with the federal Conservatives, where people were saying that everything was going to explode if Pierre Poilievre became leader. As you may remember, I said that it would be far worse if Jean Charest had become the leader over Pierre Poilievre. But in the end, ultimately, most Conservatives would stay put because the inevitability of a fourth term of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister would discourage most people from leaving and encourage them to work for Poilievre, whether they had supported him or not in the leadership race. The same theory works here. And I know Don Braid. I've known him for years. He's a nice guy. His political antennae is very sharp. He's always been a good writer. He's very astute. And he's absolutely right. Because in the end, even if some UCP members are either publicly or privately worried about my friend Danielle Smith becoming not only leader of the party, but also, Premier of Alberta, they also realize as well, one, that she's a very intelligent and reasonable person behind the scenes and always has been. Two, has always created political bridges with her opponents and her critics, which, yes, some leaders do, some don't, but a great leader, or a good leader, if you'd like, always should establish, just in case. She's always been open to discussions and ideas and sharing things, intellectual discourse, etc. But the key is three. Most Alberta members of the UCP, and many Albertans in general, do not want Rachel Notley's NDP back into government again. For that reason, whether Danielle Smith wins, or Brian Jean wins, or a little less likely Travis Toews wins, whoever wins it ultimately in the end, and it most likely will be Smith. It'll be close, but I believe she'll probably get it. They have to realize that overall, that in unity, or having strength in unity and bigger numbers is far more important and critical to keeping the province on a small c conservative track than to dismantle the party, erupt in disarray, just in fury, start new parties, new movements, and open the door to a second NDP term, where the first was a complete fluke. And the first time, it was voter frustration, equating with a lot of different things, equating to many, many years of right-leaning rule in Alberta, with the last premier being the now late Jim Prentice. They got fed up all at once and brought the NDP in. The NDP made a shambles of politics, a shambles of the economy in Alberta, and we're out with one term. Learn a lesson from other provinces, including Ontario, for example, who had Bob Rae for 4 years and let go of the NDP pretty fast and have never elected them since. There is a better way, and the best way to do it is whether you love Danielle Smith's leadership style or you dislike it. In the end, she is a far, far better choice than Rachel Notley. So I agree with Don Braid. The UCP will unite behind her, whether they agree with her, disagree with her, or in some cases are in the middle.
When October 6th, it's hard to believe that Jason Kenney is not around to fight another election.
I know.
What a crash and burn. Unbelievable. I did not, done in by COVID, really, I think, in the end.
Yeah.
And the restrictions and not being able to balance, maybe the unique Alberta culture or what have you. But my God, the fact that he did not get a chance at a second term, that his own party kicked him out, essentially.
Yep. They did.
Remarkable to me. The end of what up until that point was a really remarkable career in politics. So
it really was over 25 years, and who knows? I mean, there was even chatter, if you remember, a year or two ago, that he was sort of toying with going back into federal politics, maybe considering a run at the conservative leadership if it had ever popped up. And now it's unlikely it'll ever happen.
Crazy. Thank you, Michael Taube. Always good.
My pleasure, Rob.
Yep. We'll just speak soon. Bye-bye. Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper, my friend on the right side of things. We'll be back after the news. Rob Snow Show on City News.
The houseless crisis, because it really is a crisis down here on Rideau Street. There is not enough shelters for men especially, and we need to be helping our most vulnerable.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
I'm Nicole Martin, the proud ambassador for the Comfort Bear program. Comfort Bears provide these cuddly bears to local children who are terminally ill, facing trauma, or battling a serious illness. Every $20 donation will place a Comfort Bear into the loving arms of a child involved in our program. It is our hope to distribute 1,000 bears in 2022. Please join us and provide comfort to kids in their time of need.
My mother said we had to leave home. The communists were going to take my father away. If my parents were afraid, they didn't show us. But we would never forget our escape from Vietnam. We were lost.
And what was your job in Vietnam?
University professor. We had no home.
Do you have any family in Canada?
No, sir. Nobody wanted us.
Welcome to Canada.
Canada chose us.
Canadians open their borders, their homes, and their hearts to more than 100,000 refugees fleeing persecution after the Vietnam War.
We were home.
Enjoy the fresh outdoors. Play an important role in the lives of school-age children. Get paid to make a difference in your community. Become a crossing guard. We are currently recruiting crossing guards for the school year. We offer a competitive wage with various perks and opportunities for bonuses. Join the Ottawa Safety Council in keeping kids safe in the nation's capital. Find out more at crossing-guard.ca.
Next time on Simply Cooking by Un Chef, I'm sharing some of my Italian family secrets. Come join me and see what they are while I prepare a traditional Italian pork feast.
You see a lot of these luxury rental apartments that are coming out, and if you're a single person, it makes it extremely challenging to afford just basic lifestyle needs.
Rogers TV presents a series of original creative stories animated by local authors for children of all ages. Join us for Ottawa Storytellers.
Ladies, leave your man at home tonight.
Hey, this is Dominique Orley. I'm a part of Encore 3, and be sure to catch my set this week.
We are going downtown, leaving out all your stress and your sorrow.
Hi, I'm Julian Armour from Music and Beyond. Join us for a new show this spring on Rogers called Music and Beyond Presents.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
And the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 20th. Good morning. I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's around 13 degrees with cloudy skies. Here's what's making news this hour. Cheaper prices at the gas pump helped decelerate inflation in August to 7%. Statistics Canada says its latest consumer price report marks the second consecutive month inflation has slowed on an annual basis. The agency says transportation and shelter prices also drove the slowdown in consumer prices, but grocery prices rose at the fastest rate it's risen since 1981. StatsCan blames that and continued supply chain disruptions, the war in Ukraine, extreme weather, and higher input costs. Mayoral candidate Mark Sutcliffe says he wants some more information on third-party group Horizon Ottawa. Sutcliffe says he wants the group to clarify if it has contributed to Catherine McKenney's campaign. This comes after Horizon Ottawa called Sutcliffe out for a fundraising event that charged attendees $1,200 each to attend. The Sutcliffe campaign is reporting that Horizon Ottawa has trained 700 canvassers to go door to door to solicit support for their preferred candidate. Under provincial rules, third parties are only allowed to advertise for campaigns. They are not allowed to contribute. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in New York for the 77th General Assembly of the United Nations. Trudeau arrived in the U.S. late Monday after a long day that included attending the London funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Trudeau's UN agenda is to include talks about climate change, gender equality, and sustainable development. City News Time 11:32. I'm Danielle Bain for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
So another healthy reading on inflation today. 7% was the number for August, according to the Consumer Price Index. As for shelter prices, like all shelter prices, that big category, the reading was an increase of 6.6%, August over August. Okay, 6.6%. So what does that mean for the rental market? We're going to look at the rental market now and how things are looking here in Ottawa and across the country with the help of Ben Myers, President, Bullpen Research and Consulting. Good morning, Ben Myers.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, really nice to hear from you. How would you describe the market for rental accommodation right now?
Well, I mean, it's super hot. I mean, I don't think we've seen anything like this in a very long time. You know, the pandemic did a number on the rental market across the country, and we saw, you know, declines of upwards of 10% in the late 2020 and early 2021 periods. And now we're up almost 11% year over year. We set a new high for rentals, average rental rates in the country. So totally recovered from the pandemic declines.
Okay, so along with your firm, you did some work for rentals.ca, looking at all kinds of data for the Ottawa area. We were 12th on a list of 35 cities. Average rent $1,820 per month for a one-bedroom apartment. My goodness, $1,820 per month. Up by 13.9%. Two-bedroom, $2,230. $2,230 a month for a two-bedroom, up by 11.2%. So, look, you've been following the space for a while. Can you put these sorts of increases into some kind of perspective for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that, several major cities, Ottawa included, experienced a pretty big decline in the pandemic. So we're kind of catching up to where those declines were. But, there's several factors that are obviously boosting rent. A lot of students, stayed living with their mom and dads during COVID, and now starting their first job. So there's almost two, and in some areas, three cohorts of graduates starting their first jobs in downtown cores and employment centers, boosting rents. We've got, record levels of employment now that the borders are back open full. Immigration. We've got high interest rates, which are, probably the biggest factor leading to the growth that we've seen over the last 3 months. So, people just can't afford as much as they would have with lower interest rates. So they're deciding, to hold off and stay in the rental market. And the other factor is they see in several major cities, including Ottawa, some price correction happening in the resale housing market, and they're a little bit worried about that, and want to wait till things kind of stabilize a bit before they join the ownership market. So that's really driving up rents, specifically at the higher end, the 75th and the 90th percentiles in some of these markets are really seeing growth. So kind of the luxury rental market is going very strong in several of these cities.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Can you maybe expand a little bit on this? Because the U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates tomorrow. As I mentioned, we have this inflation report from Statistics Canada out today. The Bank of Canada hasn't been shy and said, we're not done raising interest rates. What that's doing to this dynamic, I'm renting an apartment, but I really want to get a house of my own. I want to get into the mortgage market instead of paying rent. How these high interest rates are affecting that potential for people to get into the mortgage market instead? Yeah,
I think everyone looks and they have a certain type of home and a certain neighborhood that they want to live in, and with higher interest rates, your monthly payments are going to be significantly higher to be in the same type of property as you perhaps were looking at in February or March of this year. So it's giving some people some cause of concern that they can't afford that, so they're going to stay in the rental market, and others may be able to afford that higher level with the higher interest rates, but see that the resale prices are declining, and so they want to hold off purchasing. So that's causing some demand that would have normally been buying their first home or moving up to stay in the rental market. So there's less supply on the market and higher demand, and we're seeing this kind of explosion in rental rates really across the country. Even in some of the smallest markets in Canada, we're seeing increases in rents.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You're very tuned in. So what are you hearing about what's happening with building rental accommodation? Because I'll tell you, in Ottawa, it seemed as though it was going gangbusters there for a while. I'm not sure if that's still the case. We were certainly playing catch up. I mean, we had a condo boom, but then certainly a lot of rental accommodation came online or was in the planning stages. So what's happening with that now? Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. You had, Ottawa had a bit of a condo boom going back 7 or 8 years. It kind of blew up a little bit as pricing didn't increase. So a lot of investors left the market, and several developers had bought these high density sites and decided that they would convert them to rental. So there was a big increase in the number of rental accommodations, which makes sense in a city where there's some major universities and there's turnover with different governments and people moving in and out of the city. So it makes sense to have a strong rental market. But because of inflation, as you mentioned, is driving up the costs of developers, materials and labor and all that fun stuff, and that's making the project less viable. So add on top of that the interest rate, so the carrying costs for developers to carry the land, to carry the debt on these properties. It's just making it more difficult for them to make the numbers work. So same issues are really impacting developers all across the country.
Okay. With these trends that are in place right now, when do you think things could change a bit?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball, but Bank of Canada has said that they're not done raising interest rates. I think that's going to give anyone looking to buy a little bit of pause about making a purchase right now. And we're certainly not delivering enough supply to meet this increased demand in the rental market. So I certainly expect it to continue through the fall. The fall is typically the strongest rental market of the year, so maybe we'll see a little bit of a reprieve in the December, January, February time. So if someone can put off renting until then, there'll be some opportunities. But I do expect rent to continue to rise at a fairly quick pace.
And it seems that because of this relationship between mortgage rates and, say, vacancy rents for rentals, the higher mortgage rates go, the tighter the rental market is going to be.
Exactly. Right? You got it.
Yeah. Okay. Ben Myers, thank you for your time. Very interesting. Yep. Thank you so much. That is Ben Myers joining us today. Ben is with a firm called Bullpen Research and Consulting, and that's in Kingston. 1141 Rob Snow Show. We'll be back. We'll be talking about the municipal election and the role that these third-party organizations are playing in the municipal election. Duff Conacher is going to join us, co-founder, Democracy Watch. This is City News.
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet here in Ottawa we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
Hi, Ottawa. I'm Derek
Eric Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa, and I invite you to tune in to Daytime Monday to Friday to find out what's happening in your city. We'll introduce you to fabulous artists, authors, musicians, local business owners. We'll tell you about the fantastic festivals and charity events that are happening in the city. We'll give you tips on health and wellness, some fabulous recipes, and so much more. That's Daytime Ottawa right here on Rogers TV.
I would like to see politicians and government overall, especially locals, start to support local business more, because we've had so many businesses that have shut down, and I would like to see local business grow and politicians give more, whether that's a financial contribution or some other layer of support, but something to encourage them to keep business going.
$20. And Maggie, Mrs. Calabash, come into my kitchen. A quick mayonnaise, egg yolks, garlic, Dijon mustard, lemon juice, olive oil, immersion blender. Go down, come up. Voila, mayonnaise. Boom, 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 boom. $20. $20. Yeah.
Flooding is causing widespread devastation in Pakistan. More than 1,000 people have died. 1/3 of the country is underwater, and 6 million people are in need of emergency assistance. The humanitarian coalition is responding to the crisis in Pakistan. You can help. Donate today at together.ca, and your donation will be matched by the Canadian government. That's together.ca, the humanitarian coalition. Together, saving more lives.
That's the way I kill my skill sharpen, cause I've been here sharpening.
What's going on, y'all? It's Jay Morris, aka your favorite light skin, and you're gonna check out my performance on Encore Ottawa 3 coming up this week. Let's go.
All again, murderation, 911 call it in. Me, I murder every.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
11:45. Rob Snow Show, home stretch. Sam LaPrade coming up right after the noon news to keep you company this afternoon, keep you right up to date. There is a far-left-wing group called Horizon Ottawa. It is endorsing Catherine McKenney for mayor. It has endorsed a slate of candidates in many of the ward races for city council. So we're going to explore third-party groups, registered third parties in our municipal election campaign with the help of Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch, back with me on the Rob Snow Show. Good morning. Thanks for taking the time again.
My pleasure.
Generally speaking, Duff Conacher, what is your opinion on registered third parties in election campaigns at any level of government?
Well, the key thing is to ensure that they are actually representing voters' interests and are not just fronts for one person or for a big business or something else, other type of organization. And there are some good measures. They're not as strong as they need to be. But there are some good measures in the Ontario law, which are that a contribution cannot be more than $1,200 to a third party. So that limits essentially it being a front for one person funding the whole campaign themselves. Also can't spend more than $25,000. And, there should be an examination of whether that's a reasonable limit and also whether there's a reasonable limit on the amounts that candidates can spend. Certainly in federal elections, the limit is way too high for third parties spending. They're allowed to spend up to $500,000, and that is just and that's one individual can spend that amount. One individual could spend $25,000 as well in the municipal election in Ontario, and at a federal or provincial level in Ontario, $600,000 in the 12 months leading up to a campaign. And one individual should not be allowed to spend as much as a group that represents thousands of voters. So in that way, the rules are favor wealthy individuals who might want to intervene in an election.
Well, the spending limit for a registered third party in this municipal election campaign, for example, this Horizon Ottawa group, as you mentioned, is $25,000, which I'm told is about the same as a candidate for a city council seat can spend in a campaign. About 25. It depends on the size of the ward, of course, right? So
yes. Yeah, and that's why really there shouldn't be blanket limits.
Okay.
You need to have a different limit for an individual voter who registers as a third party compared to a group that represents thousands of people. It just doesn't. It violates the fundamental principle of one person, one vote, to allow one wealthy individual to spend $25,000 of their own money, and a group that might represent thousands of voters in the city to only be allowed to spend that same amount.
Okay, and the $25,000. Sorry, Duff. The $25,000. What can it spend that money on?
Advertising essentially is what the limit is for. If you're just posting things on social media, or emailing your members, that is not covered by the limit. That type of spending. It's only spending on advertising that is limited, and so it allows issuing as many news releases as you want, holding events, holding news conferences, holding all candidates debates. None of that counts towards the spending limit. And there's also an important rule, which is that you can't collude with a candidate. So a candidate has a spending limit. A candidate can't cooperate with a third party in order to exceed that spending limit by having the third party spend a bunch of money that essentially is just supporting the candidate. So
what would be an example of collusion?
Well, essentially just coordinating activities.
Okay.
And advertising. So let's say the candidates, they all highlight all these issues that I support in my advertising, and you highlight all these other issues that I support in my advertising, or you go and attack the other candidate that I don't want to attack personally because that might be seen as negative from some voters. So you attack them on my behalf.
Right.
And any kind of that kind of information sharing on strategy and tactics and spending is illegal and should be. Otherwise, you just have candidates and at the federal and provincial level, parties setting up front groups.
This is very
third parties.
This is very interesting. So there's a registered third party. It has endorsed a candidate for mayor and a slate of candidates. Okay? We endorse these candidates. Okay? It has had training sessions. This is how to canvass door to door. This is what you're supposed to do when you canvass door to door. One would assume that the registered third party that has endorsed a certain candidate for mayor and a slate of other candidates, when it's holding a training session for volunteers to go door to door, they would be canvassing on behalf of those candidates that they have endorsed. How is that fine? How is that not collusion?
Well, as long as they're not coordinating with the candidate, and that includes that no one in the third party can be involved in the candidate's campaign, because by definition, that would mean coordination. So like a campaign manager of a campaign could not also be the head of a third party. But beyond just actually sharing the same people on campaigns, you can't have communication where you're strategizing to, for example, when you're talking about canvassing, the candidate saying, okay, I'll cover this part. If you're talking about mayor, I'll cover this part of the city, and you as third party go and cover that part of the city, and that'll save me money and effort trying to cover that another part of the city. It has to be watched very closely, obviously, because it's easy to have these communications secretly. The classic in the underground parking lot, the classic from the Hollywood movies, where these kind of communications take place. It has to be watched very closely, because otherwise it will just become an avenue for candidates and parties to exceed spending limits.
Somebody knocks on the door and says, I'm with Horizon Ottawa, These are our issues. We would like you to vote for this candidate in this ward and this person for mayor. That's not collusion.
No. And if it was coordinated with the candidate or any of the candidates, if they've endorsed a slate, then it becomes collusion. And it's rightfully illegal because the candidates have spending limits, and you don't want them to be able to use third parties as front groups to exceed those spending limits and be able to outspend other candidates just because they have the cooperation of third parties. So third party just has to maintain that independence, and the candidate has to maintain that independence from the third party. And it's a very important rule. Again, otherwise you'd see candidates and parties just set up 10 third parties as front groups and share a coordination of fundraising and spending that money, and you would essentially be able to increase your spending limit by 10 times.
Okay. What do you think about these allegations? I'm sure you're aware of them against Mark Sutcliffe about cash for access.
The donation limit is too high.
Okay.
And
it used to be higher, but
yes,
yeah,
used to be unlimited.
Unlimited, right.
Yeah,
okay.
And corporations and unions could give directly.
Yeah, that's not allowed anymore. I mean, I suppose you can get around it by having everybody at the construction company give $1,200, but
yeah,
right.
And that if they choose to do so on their own, that's fine.
Right.
But $1,200 is more than what an average voter can afford. And as soon as you have a system like that, it's undemocratic. If we believe in one person, one vote, then the donation limit should be what an average person can afford to donate. Otherwise, money will be used as a means of influence. Mark Sutcliffe was and is being careful, according to reports, that he has a rule that he's not accepting donations from the owners and executives of development companies and unions, as well as their family members, and that no one was invited from those type of companies to the actual event. But one of the organizers is a commercial real estate lawyer, so they would be tied into developers. There's a sports entrepreneur, a businessman, all of these. Every voter is a lobbyist in some way. They want something from City Hall.
Well, of course, yeah.
And so when you allow people to be organizing these events who may be seeking decisions from City Hall, or you have a $1,200 donation limit that is much higher than an average voter can afford, then you essentially have a system that amounts to legalized bribery. And it doesn't matter how careful you be, you're going to have big donors to your campaign. And also people being able to fundraise significant amounts because the donation limit is so high. Those are called bundlers. And you may have seen in Vancouver right now, there's a big scandal because the mayor's party has, there was a list of bundlers that was discovered for the mayor's party. People tied to developers who each had a target listed in this piece of paper for how much they were supposed to raise in donations of $1,200 each from others. And, so if you want something from City Hall and you hold a fundraising event in your home for 100 people and they each donate $1,200, you've raised $120,000. And you're going to be a very important person to that politician if they win.
Yeah, with that kind of money you will be. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the only way to stop big money is to stop big money donations and lower the donation limit to $50 to $100. And that would stop all of this stuff, and hopefully it will be done sooner than later.
Thank you, Duff Conacher.
Thanks for your interest. Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye. Yeah, Duff Conacher from Democracy Watch. Always interesting, and the plot thickens in the municipal election campaign. Sam LaPrade getting ready for her show.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be an interesting race for sure, coming up very quickly. October 24th is going to be here before you know it.
What do you got today?
We're going to be speaking with Rachel Wilson. Actually, ironically, agencies like the Ottawa Food Bank, she's the CEO of the Ottawa Food Bank, are really also watching this election. Right?
Oh,
Who's going to
really?
be at the
Okay.
table? Because all those decisions
Yeah.
that are made at that table affect agencies like the Ottawa Food Bank.
Okay.
We'll be talking to Rachel Wilson a little bit later as well.
Okay. Sam LaPrade Show coming up right after the noon news here on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.